Good evening and welcome to the May 18th, 2023 Curriculum and Pupil Services Committee meeting of the School District of Haverford Township. We're meeting here in the Oakmont Administration Building and the meeting is being recorded for later viewing. Let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And I will turn it over to Jen Sachs, our Assistant Superintendent, to walk us through tonight's agenda.
Great, thank you so much, Ms. Wiedemann. We have quite a bit on the agenda this evening, and for those who are here, you can see we have quite a few folks in the audience here to present as well. So before we begin, I just have remarks about two quick items, and then we'll go on to the diversity and inclusion goal update. And then we'll hear about our modernizing assessment committee, and then our technology update, and then the calendar, and then a wellness update, and then public comment, and then we're finished. So we do have a lot going on, but it's a very exciting time for us to be able to present all of this to the board. So just two quick notes. The first is an update about the homework policy. You may recall at a few previous curriculum and pupil services meeting, we had some discussion about homework policy, and we had some requests from some board members to just get some teacher input and get, take another look. So at the June policy meeting, we'll bring the policy forward and we'll have some suggestions for language really relating to the elementary homework. So just wanted to make sure everybody knew that was coming up at the June policy meeting. Secondly, we had some questions about the use of some specific books in the curriculum, so I just want to talk through a little bit about our process. As anyone who knows me knows, we have in this district a curriculum audit cycle. It has been paused for the last 2 years, and we are going to resume it next year. And this will begin with English language arts next year. So basically, it starts with an audit, and an audit includes looking at our current practices, our current curriculum, our current resources, the assessments we give, and then the results of all of that. And then we also look at how all of that compares with the required state standards as well as best practices and research. At this time is when we review all of our current and potential resources, and eventually we make recommendations to the board regarding the curriculum itself and the resources to be adopted for what we call core instruction. Occasionally, a text will be reviewed outside of that cycle and maybe shifted to become not a core resource, but a supplemental one, or maybe even paused in its use until we can take a look at how it's working and maybe what other resources are out there, and then reconsider it as part of a next upcoming audit. So this topic, as we know, was raised at last week's board meeting, and I just want to make sure I note for the public and what may be a reminder or more information for some on the board, that while we do have many books approved at the secondary level, we have a list of over 100 for high school and over 100 for middle school. Not all of those books are sort of active or books that we always use all the time, but they do remain on the approved list. So it's not like a removal and saying that we don't approve of them anymore unless that's done through a process of a curriculum audit. Regarding specifically the book To Kill a Mockingbird, I want to confirm we have paused the use of this text in our middle school in recent years. Initially, students brought concerns about being required to read offensive material, which we decided we would investigate further. This included engaging in a process to learn more about how we and other schools teach the text. We certainly don't dispute the literary merit of the text or our teachers' dedication to making it meaningful by providing context around the story. Our goal was to thoroughly review the book in terms of if and where it was placed and what supports could be provided to our teachers and our students who engage with it as part of a curriculum. So this process, which took place in the early months of 2020, included meeting with the teachers who teach the text, researching if and when other districts around us require the text, engaging with consultants, and observing lessons. We were in the process of deciding how to get input from a larger number of students when school buildings were closed as a part of COVID lockdowns, and we really had to change our teaching plan to accommodate remote learning. So while we always strive to gain teacher input, and we usually find ourselves making the decision that matches that input, there are times that administrators are the ones to make final decisions. In this case, we decided to pause the use of this text knowing that we could consider it and the rest of our novels as part of a larger ELA curriculum audit. As I mentioned at the start of these remarks, that process will begin this coming fall. Once complete, we will bring recommendations to the board regarding the adoption and continued use of resources from K through 12 for English language arts. At that time, we'll be sure to note any changes to the curriculum and the resources. We'll also keep the board and the public updated along the way with presentations at these curriculum and pupil services meetings. And of course, we always look forward to engaging in this process and coming back to you to share our progress.
Jen, may I ask a question? You said, you explained the curriculum review cycle, which we're aware of being on the board, and you said supplemental cycle, something comes up. Shouldn't the board and the public be aware of that? If you're pulling a book that was approved by the board, a core curriculum book, shouldn't that be public knowledge? Like, shouldn't that have maybe been brought? I mean, now, I would not have been on the board in 2020, so I would not have been involved, but isn't that fair to say, for the sake of transparency, that should be? And I'm just gonna, I mean, I think I was very clear.
Well, to pause, what Jen has said there is that the use of it is paused, so it is not something that is no longer approved. If it would no longer be approved, then yes, that would come to the board. But there are the extensive list of approved resources are used at different times. And sometimes it's up to the teachers when and what resources they're using.
I mean, I think I made my feelings clear last week about not teaching books that make people uncomfortable. I think that's how you learn. But I know I made some marks about transparency, and I'll be honest, I find this a little bit more not as transparent. I mean, I wrote as a parent to the district asking a simple question, and I was directed, oh, you have to go to Haverford Middle School administration. If there was this supplemental curriculum review cycle, why not just tell a parent that, oh, this was paused, why would one be directed? Then I hear a different story from HMS, then the teachers are telling me, I would love to know the content of their meetings with Sage Wellness. If there was a supplement, I mean, to me, that causes problems to me as a board member and a parent. If there was this supplemental cycle, then why not, when a parent writes to the district and asks a question, why refer them out to Haverford Middle School administration? If this is the curriculum process, we paused it, why wouldn't that be just shared? And that to me that causes me some issues with transparency. I'll just leave my comments at that, but that's concerning to me. You know, it's just kind of like pass the buck, pass it down the line. Let's make this Mr. Horan's problem. Like, you know, that's.
Well, and perhaps you and I should have a conversation about that, like when we direct board members in particular to reach out to people at a building, and when we would, respond to the person as a board member. As you know, that can sometimes be tricky. So you and I can talk about that a little more.
Okay, thank you.
I would just like to add, Ms. Sasso, I appreciate you explaining the process. I also appreciate that there's a multi-layered approach to how decisions are made for our curriculum. I know that as a parent and as a board member, but I love to hear it explained. So I think it's important for our public to know that our administrators are not just making decisions haphazardly, that there are multiple things going into place into how we're teaching our students. Also, I think it's pretty amazing that we have this plethora of resources to make these decisions. There are other districts that are not as fortunate as us, and they just have to teach what they have. And so the fact that we have the ability to pause something or to review it or to consider it further and still continue to teach, I think that speaks volumes for our district, our administration, and especially our teachers. So thank you, I appreciate that.
And I'd just like to mention also, as somebody who writes curriculum at the college level often, just to note, one of the struggles I always have is there's so much good reading out there, and there's limited time. And how do you pick and choose what is going to fit your learning objectives that you have? And sometimes you pull something that you've loved to teach from before because it no longer meets the learning objectives that you specifically have for that course. And so I think one of the important things that you mentioned as part of the process is looking at what are the learning objectives that we need to have from this particular book. Is it about poetry? Is it about this? Is it about novel development? Is it about character development? What are the learning objectives? And sometimes that means we take certain books away and bring books in because there are learning objectives we need to meet. So I appreciate the process of looking at all of those aspects.
I mean, I agree with what Dr. McKay said. There's obviously, you could make a case for, I mean, I couldn't even list to you if you said, give me my top 10 favorite books that I've ever read in school. I would have a really tough time ranking them. I think the issue to me was more transparency, and we have teachers who are telling the district, parents should not be hearing one thing from the district, another thing from teachers. People have to have a consistent message, and things need to be done in a transparent fashion. And I am disturbed that teachers were saying they wanted this book, and I am disturbed at the thought that children could come in and say, we don't want, like that causes me a lot of conflict as a parent, and a school board member, that's who's making the decisions, and that's what I was told point blank, that it was 4 to 5 students who are uncomfortable. That raises a lot of red flags to me, and I mean, I do appreciate we have a wealth of resources, absolutely. Yes, there's many good books that can be taught, but, you know, teachers who are, there's a lot more, I'll cut myself off before I get myself in trouble. Okay.
Move on. Okay. All right, thank you for everyone's comments and input. Okay, now we will move on to our next item on the agenda, and that is going to be a goal update from Ms. Christina Carter. She's going to talk to us about our diversity and inclusion goal. She's going to lead the team because there are a team of folks here to talk to us about that.
Hi, good evening, members of the board. We're excited to come and share the work that we have been doing around our district goal number 3, diversity and inclusion. Tonight, we will share the process we took in creating the diversity and inclusion action plan that goes with the goal, and the implementation steps that have been completed previously, what we're currently doing, and what we're planning to do in the future. I'm going to first let Ms. Saxa go through and give another overview for those who may not be familiar with it. I know our board is, but if anybody in the audience is not familiar with our process for strategic planning and comprehensive planning of how the goal was identified.
So I'll just go very briefly. You may recall we, as a district, engaged in a strategic planning approach in the 2019 school year, 2019-20 school year. We had a group of representative community members. We had students, we had teachers, we had staff, we had people who've been here a long time, people who are new to the district, family members of students who are enrolled in our EL programs, PTO people who are not typically involved, community members, local businesses, all came together to take into account lots of input that was gathered from our consultant, from our community, and develop and determine what the trends were and develop some strategic goals that would reflect what the community had expressed as important. The community input was gathered throughout a series of live forums where people could attend and work with our consultant and share what they thought was important. There were interviews with administrators, teachers, support staff. There were over 4,000 surveys returned, and those came from community members, parents, guardians, and students. And really the trends that came out of that were in these 3 major buckets: preparing contemporary citizens, social and emotional wellness, and diversity and inclusion. And so the team that came together actually went through some of the feedback, came up with those as their sort of main 3 areas, and then developed some language around the goal. After we did that, we did go back and take another look at our mission and pillars to make sure that they were still in alignment. There really wasn't that much to change. There was like a little wording here and there. It was pretty reflective still of what was important to the community. And so we have come to the goals that you see sort of on the right there, and you've probably seen a whole bunch of times if you've been in our schools or if you've attended any of our meetings. And so Christina and her team are here to report tonight on the one that's being pointed to there, diversity and inclusion.
And might I just add about the strategic planning process, that one of the assumptions to begin with was that the core functions of the district were met and achieved, right? Like academic achievement, budget, facilities, all of that is, so we were asked to like consider beyond that, like really that kind of vision and strategy direction, assuming that the other core functions of the district were being achieved.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So I'll give you kind of a little overview. I'm going to go over some background of where we've come from, where we're going, and then you're going to see some of our phenomenal educators and our administrators who have worked really hard on this plan with me come up and present. I'll introduce each of them to you, and they'll tell you about the work of what they've done to create the action plan. So many of you are familiar with BASIS, which I know we hear it a lot, but just to familiarize ourselves with what is BASIS, it is really a way of thinking, of professional development that the district went through starting in about 2016, and it stands for Belonging and Social Cultural Identities in Schools. And that was done through Dr. Jean Stanley. So during that time, our staff engaged in some trainings in partnership around race, gender, and identity. As mentioned in 2020, Mrs. Saxa kind of talked through that. The district identified this as one of the goals. And from there, our district really began doing a lot of the work in this area. So I always like to say, it did not start with me. It is not new. We have been doing the work for a long time. So we're just going to go over some of those things and give it a little bit more framework as we go through it. Through that process, the committee really identified three main areas at first. They identified disproportionality of gifted and higher level courses as a focus area, hiring and retention of diverse staff, and culturally relevant instruction was the primary focus. Then as time went along and we continued being professionally developed as a district, the administration and various stakeholders through the use of the PSSM, through conversations and trainings, really realized that we needed to bring in more around student voice and family engagement, and that became an additional area of focus that we've now added in. And as you can tell, the district has been making a lot of progress in this area and has grown to the point that we are able to shift from BASIS in a way of thinking to actually putting our work into an action plan with some implementation steps and goals around what we're doing. Thank you. So on this slide here, you are going to see our process. I'm going to walk you through the process of how we created our action plan. So before developing the plan, we had conversations with our staff from the original committee. The work that was done for the strategic plan and comprehensive goal, there were set people, some of them who are still here are going to present as well. But we worked with them, and then we also identified some additional members who have joined our school community as leaders who can help lead the work as well. In February, we sat down and we looked at what was previously decided, what are the new focus area, the one new focus area that we've identified. And we really looked at, does that apply now? And so through that process, we identified our leadership team. We then moved into identifying who's going to sit on that as a co-chair and who's going to participate in our subcommittees to lead the work and actually do a lot of the work around it. We did monthly meetings starting back in February, and the team really got to work. They really began actually just thinking through what we value as a district, what are the things we have been doing and what we want to continue to do. And they started working with their subcommittees and identifying those implementation steps. And these steps are going to live with us until 2025 so that we're in alignment with the comprehensive plan and the strategic plan. So you're going to see that we're going to relook at the work as we relook at the comprehensive and strategic plan. So it's not just for the 2 years, but it's going to continue. But we just want to make sure that we're relevant with what we're doing as a district as well. I can say before they even get started, I'm very impressed being one of the newest members on the team coming in the district. I was so impressed at the work that they're doing. I think as a district, what makes us so unique is that not one person actually holds the weight of doing the equity work. Where in other places, sometimes one person does it and they have to figure everything out. But here, you really see all the people who are doing the work and the expectation across all buildings. And I think that's what makes us great as a district, is that we really believe it to a core and we work on it together. Here, when you look at this slide, you're going to see our structure for the district. So you'll see that a lot of this work is led by myself out of the Office of Learning and Assessment. And then it's really broken down into 2 areas. So we have our DILC, which is our Diversity and Inclusion Leadership Team, which those individuals are here to speak to you with some of the subcommittee members. It's myself and Ms. Saxa who helps advise, because a lot of it is curriculum. So we want to make sure that we're in alignment with all that we're doing in curriculum, so that we're working together on that. We also have at the building levels, we have our principals who are the leads of our building equity committees, and then we have those members who also sit on the team with them. And then we also newly have developed, which we're really proud of in the work, and we're continuing to develop it, is our Oakmont Workplace Culture Team. We know that we cannot leave out the rest of our staff. It can't just be educators and administrators. It has to be our support staff, our office staff, others who work in the district. Because we work with our community as well. So we want to make sure that we're making it a great place for those who work here and those who we interact with each and every day. So on the side, you'll see our subcommittee members for the DILC priorities and the individuals in each schools. Right now, we're still working to develop and get more people interested and onto it. I think the more that they hear that we're doing, we're going to get some more people that are interested in joining. But our goal is to make sure that we have representation across buildings so that everybody has a voice within the work that we're doing. So for this, we have priority number 1. So we have Beth Mastrocola from, yep, you can come right on up, from Coopertown, our principal from Coopertown, and we have Randy Taylor, our assistant principal from the middle school, who's going to go over our first priority. You'll hear them as priorities instead of goals, because we have our main goal and we're all collectively working together.
Well, you stole the first line of my presentation.
Sorry.
I am Beth Mastrocola, the principal of Coopertown Elementary School. But I'm also proud to still be co-chairing the work of the Diversity and Inclusion Goal. I was a founding member, which makes me feel really old along with these glasses. Now that we have made more specific priorities, the team and I are focused on the disproportionality in higher level courses and gifted education. Our goal, Randy and I, is to increase, and everyone, is to increase the likelihood of non-white students in gifted and higher level classes. This work started several years ago when we took our first steps at addressing this. The administration looked over data last summer that broke down the representation of students by percentage in our gifted advanced and AP classes. This started conversations with the principals about steps we could take as the instructional leaders of our schools for better identification. Last fall, the district brought in a training on the characteristics of gifted students, and then Randy and I came together, as Christine was saying, right before February, around that time, and recruited a team, they were up there just on the last slide, of passionate educators and principals representing all the schools to take even further steps. Randy has the fun part of the presentation. He is going to elaborate on the amazing work that the middle school has already started doing, as well as what our team has been doing this year. Randy, take it away.
Thanks, Beth. Great job. So again, thank you for having us and allowing us to have this space to describe the work that we've really embarked on. I was talking to Christina Carter earlier. I'm very passionate about this, and I'm quite loquacious, so I can really go on and on. But I really want to summarize and just give you all the major points to have you understand the level of work that went into trying to accomplish this task. So first thing that comes to mind is actually what I'd like to do is just put it in context really quickly. So, I mean, I'm sure you can see that slide, but to give you a more contextual background, right now in the middle school, we have a little over 1,600 students, and in our seminar program, so our gifted program, we have exactly 1 black student, right? So 1 student out of over 1,600 are, in receiving gifted services. So just to give you some context of why this work is important. All right, so now we know and understand, why this is important. It's also, for us, we had to figure out, all right, so how do we operationalize this? It's one thing to recognize, hey, we have this issue. What are we actually going to do to solve this issue? How can we come up with a system or a process? So what I want to do is provide you again, I can go on and on, but I'm going to give you a quick overview of what we specifically have done at the middle school, and then after that, talk about what the next steps are, how we can really get this process to be emulated in the rest of our buildings. So the first thing that we did at the middle school is we had to go and look at data, of course. And specifically, our data really consisted of looking at all students. And again, I want to emphasize that this is not an exclusionary process. We look at all students, right? So we're not only looking at students of color when it comes to identifying those who could be in higher level courses or who could possibly be tested for gifted services. This is everyone, all right? So after going through our data, we identify student levels, right? So if they're level 1, they're demonstrating an aptitude to do well. We also reviewed grades. We looked at benchmark results. We looked at our unit tests, the PSSAs, as I mentioned. So we looked at that for everyone. And then from there, we pulled out students of color. So not just black students, Hispanic students, everyone, pretty much non-white students. We specifically pulled them out of all that data that we collected. And through that process, we continued to just kind of filter out and identify, all right, who are students who are really demonstrating a strong aptitude. And then from there, we compiled a list of those who demonstrated that they can do well at higher level courses. All of their assessment data showed that they were proficient or advanced, and their grades were really high as well. And one thing I forgot to mention is teacher input, all right? So after that, we have the luxury at the middle school where we meet once a week as a pupil services department, and we're talking about all kids. So we already had a process in place, so we kind of supplemented this process. We didn't reinvent the wheel. We said, you know what? We already have a process for how we identify students, but now we're specifically going to look at those who are underrepresented. So during that, throughout the course of a school year, we continued to look at the students that we compiled on the list and just monitor their progress. And then students who, especially after the first quarter, who continue to demonstrate proficiency on their benchmark assessments, high grades and all of that, we then would say, hey, you know what? Here are some students who we're going to recommend to go through our child study team process. And again, I don't want to insult your intelligence, but for those who are not too familiar with the child study team process, that really is just kind of pulling students in, not them, pulling them in, but looking at, all right, who can we possibly recommend for testing and go through a process, or go through our testing process. So every week we meet, we talk about the students, and those who go through the CST process, the child study team process, we continue to collect data, and then we give what we call a teacher data summary, which is a document that we send out to our teachers to get their input as well. So when we get their input, we continue to monitor their progress. We then see, okay, by the second quarter, we continue to look at those who are really demonstrating strengths, and we say, okay, let's now go through a screening. So one of the screenings that we do is the Slauson screening, and with that screening, that's kind of like an initial screening where you kind of see, like, do the students have the skills that possibly show that they could be gifted? So once we go through that process, and if they, screen well, then we officially submit what we call a permission to evaluate, after we call the parents, of course, to express, like our interest in, and see if they're interested in having their child tested, right? So if the parent is on board, we send them a permission to evaluate form, and then we go through actually testing them to identify, like, are they eligible to receive gifted services or not, all right? So that's the process for gifted. Now, the process for trying to determine whether our students move up to higher level courses or not are very similar to what I described before. We're always looking at all the data that I mentioned. We're always looking for teacher input. And we take the first and second quarter and maybe even the third quarter. And students who consistently show improvement and growth and performance, we then say, you know what, let's move them up to the next level. So if they're a level 2, we move them up to a level 1. If they're already a level 1 in math, then we move them up to a level 1A, right? And we're always trying to move students up. And again, this is not just non-white students, this is all students, right? So again, I can go on and on about this, but to wrap this up, our process really is, we're already doing this, but we're paying special attention to those who historically have been underrepresented. And what does that mean? That means that, we're not only looking at behavior, we're not only looking at, like, if we think a child, has the aptitude, or if they, come from a good family, or whatever the case is, we're actually using data to inform our decisions, and we're making sure that we're not letting students fall through the cracks. Thank you.
All right, you all set? All right, thank you so much.
Can I ask just a quick
Oh,
question?
sure.
Just for clarification, I really appreciate you going through that whole process. I'm curious, in case, like, I'm not familiar, or maybe some other
Sure.
folks are not familiar, What of those steps are not test related? Because somebody can be a very bright student, but not good at taking a test.
Sure.
So of some of those things that you mentioned as assessments, which of those are like not necessarily a benchmark test or other tests?
Yeah,
related?
so that's a really great question. So a lot of times we know sometimes tests, there's like an implicit bias that goes with that. We know certain students may not have, like certain knowledge, but they have strengths in many ways. So we not only looked at, and everything I described was more quantitative, and what I neglected to mention, and I'm glad you brought this up, is that we do have a qualitative approach as well. So that really relies on teacher recommendations too, and classroom observation. So when we're reaching out to teachers, we're saying, hey, we're paying attention to certain students, tell us, from your perspective about them, what do you think about them? And then they'll share their input with us on, commenting on their performance and what they think about them. And then we go into the classroom, because we do walkthroughs, throughout the course of a week. Well, when a part of our walkthroughs are not only looking at instruction, but we're also identifying students in this process as well. So our qualitative, just when we go in, we see, all right, like what is their level of like paying attention? What, like if they're engaged in the discussion, what is their contribution to that? How well can they elaborate? Like how articulate are they, right? So, we go and see it for ourselves. We ask teachers for their input as well. So there is that qualitative part where it's not just the numbers that they produce, but it's their ability to show that, how well they can construct knowledge through conversation, through engagement.
Great, thank you.
I'd like to add too that when we had the gifted training that I referred to, it really pointed out that the gifted student isn't always the one sitting there with their hand up and answering all the questions. And so I know at the elementary level, sometimes when there's behavior issues in a classroom, we're also looking at that child to possibly be gifted because maybe they're bored, So that's something that training really helped all the administrators with putting a different lens, and the teachers, they were at the training as well.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And just to add to that, as far as behavior, when we would talk to the teachers, a lot of times when we're giving the teachers the teacher data summary that I mentioned, the little form that we give them that they kind of provide input, specifically identifying what the student's strengths and weaknesses are. A lot of times when we get that input back, it often is describing behavior. So one thing that we would do is, and again, this is the middle school process that we're hoping to be able to have that translate into all the other schools, is just talking to the teachers about specifically how do you identify and distinguish between someone's academic ability and describe what can they do academically, what are their strengths and what are their limitations, versus their behavior, because oftentimes we see that we conflate them and we pretty much judge a student based on how they're behaving. And then to Beth's point, like it could be perhaps they're bored and that's why they're acting out. So it's really important for us to really continue to work with the teachers to identify and distinguish between academic ability versus behavior, being able to accurately describe that, and then being able to really look at what the student's overall performance is. And another thing that I apologize and neglected to mention is that even though this process works in the middle school, we don't expect this to be 100% replicated in the other buildings, right? Because we're structured in a different way, different from the high school and certainly different from all the elementary schools. But the idea is that we meet, and the next steps are when we're meeting with our subcommittees, we're talking about, here is the information I shared about what the middle school is doing. How can you operationalize this within your own buildings, right? Within your own structures, based on the foundation of or based on the process that, we laid out in the middle school. And a lot of times, elementary schools are still going through a CST process. So that is another way that that process can also take place. High school certainly, has similar CST process. So again, when we meet weekly to talk about kids, we're specifically looking at what's the best method for identifying the potential of all kids. And we especially focus on those who historically been underrepresented.
Thank you. You can see how fortunate I am that I get to work with such passionate and talented people. So I thank you so much for coming and sharing. So next up, we have our priority 2. We have Dr. George Ramundas, the Assistant Director of HR, who's going to share. His co-chair is busy being a dad tonight, so he sent in a video, so he'll introduce that. So I'll let you take it over.
Thank you, Ms. Carter. I'd like to have Randy and Beth come back up again and help me out with this one. They did a great job. I'm up here by myself. So good evening, everyone, and thank you for allowing me to present Priority 2, Recruit and Retain Diverse Staff with a Diversity Inclusion Plan. So as mentioned this evening, we talked about the district's goal, and the goal is to maintain the goal of recruiting, hiring, and retaining a more diverse workforce as part of our strategic goal. We are hoping to increase educators of color's representation yearly from the 2022-23 representation of 3%. And looking at what we are currently implementing to meet this goal, we have our Haverford High School student leaders attending the Future Educators Academy at the DCIU, learning about the field of education. Wouldn't it be wonderful one day to have our high school students come back and be teachers in our district? That'd be a beautiful thing, Mr. Dungy. Beautiful. We would love that. Yeah, I want it to happen. I want it to happen. We're also excited for our first annual Ford's Career Event happening next week. HR and Ms. Carter have attended multiple DVCE job fairs to recruit diverse candidates at the University of Pennsylvania. I'm excited to announce a new partnership with Temple University. Starting next school year, we'll have student teachers from Temple University in our district. In looking for the future implementation, we're looking to design insight and exit interviews to focus on retention in our district. We're looking to revamp the HR website to include the language aligned with Priority 2 initiatives. We also want to formalize teacher and administrative affinity groups to support our diverse staff. And we want to develop, as Ms. Carter mentioned, our Oakmont Workplace Culture and Committee. And as we mentioned, unfortunately, Mr. Smith is unable to be here this evening, but the next slide is going to show you a video of him with the Grow Your Own program and the information that he's going to talk to us about. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Leon Smith, and I'm a social studies teacher at the high school. I'm also the district Grow Your Own developer. We're here this evening to discuss the goal of recruiting and retaining our diverse staff, particularly through a Grow Your Own program. The district maintains the goal of recruiting, hiring, and retaining a more diverse workforce as part of its strategic goals. Our baseline is going to be 3%, and we look to increase educator diversity yearly following this school year. Educator diversity is important to the success of all students. Consequently, I approached the district about the need for a Grow Your Own developer so that we could work to increase the number of educators of color that we have. I started a position towards the second semester of last year. And in that position, so far, I've looked to attend conferences where I can find out the latest information in terms of increasing educator diversity, attending many webinars, reading research from leading scholars in this field, really trying to get as much information as I can. This year, my work has surrounded 3 areas: facilitation, research, and then networking and advocacy. My facilitation work has revolved around our Future Educators Academy that we have through the DCIU. We identified students in 9th and 10th grade from diverse backgrounds that we felt would be good teachers and possess qualities that would make them very effective in the classroom. And so throughout this year, I've traveled with the students to the DCIU for their monthly sessions and then debriefed with them afterwards and answered any questions they had about the education profession. With regard to research, I've conducted extensive research really on the importance of educator diversity. And really narrow the focus to grow your own programs and look to see what other districts are doing, not only in our area, but throughout the state and nationally. What are some of the best practices? What are some of the forms that grow your own programs can take? And what legislation is needed to support the formation of grow your own programs in our state in particular? Additionally, I've looked at pathway programs that have centered around CTE standards that have now been released by PTE, and looking at how we can possibly incorporate those CTE standards into our curriculum at Haverford so that we can make education and entering the field of education very seamless. The network and advocacy, that is something I've really been very passionate about. And I've worked to establish contacts with educator prep programs in the area so that we can hopefully one day formulate articulation agreements where our students could possibly start some dual enrollment work and then continue their education at their institutions. I've had an opportunity to be on a call with the leader of the National Grow Your Own organization to hear what other states are doing, what Grow Your Own programs look like in their diverse forms, how to set up one. And so, additionally, I've also met with a PA senator, Senator Comita, who has proposed a Grow Your Own bill. And so, right now, the PA House has just passed two Grow Your Own bills. And so now it's moving towards the Senate. And I've had an opportunity to meet with Senator Comita, talk about the importance of educator diversity, talk about what these programs could look like and how legislators could help us. And I'm also traveling to Harrisburg on June 6th to advocate for a companion bill in the Senate that would mirror the House bills that passed so that we can have support at the legislative level to support the work that we're doing in our district. Additionally, I've had the opportunity to research and then network and interview Educators Rising, which is a national organization that offers a Grow Your Own curriculum, and then also an extracurricular club where students have the opportunity to engage in education-related national competitions once a year. Moving towards the future, we hope to design a course that incorporates those CTE standards and also the Chapter 49 school code language surrounding culturally relevant and sustaining education competencies. Because we want to create an environment where students want to come back to teach, that they felt affirmed and they felt like they saw themselves in the curriculum. And so these are strategies that we hope will encourage more students to enter the profession, but also allow them to engage in dual enrollment so that by the time they go to the educator prep program, maybe they've already had 2 years of their college expenses taken care of. Because we know that the cost of college has risen over the last 10 to 15 years. And if we're dealing with students that may be struggling or trying to pay for this, we know that when they enter the field of education, when they first get a job, they may not make a whole bunch of money. But if we can try to cut the amount of debt they may have, it may make education more of an attractive or more viable pathway for them. We also want to work with partners at HBCUs to try to get some student teachers at Haverford and also potential candidates. And we really want to work to cultivate an early interest in our district among students of color to enter the profession. Invite them in at a very young age. Can we identify them and say, hey, have you ever thought about being a teacher? Because I see qualities in you that would make you an effective educator. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
We're going to let Mr. Smith know he did a really nice job.
Yes, you can see we have two very busy individuals who work on this priority, as you can hear from all that they're doing. But I truly have the pleasure to work with them and learn from them because they really are committed to the work that they're doing to make sure that we're continuing to grow our staff and diversify and make sure that students also get to come back into this field. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
So I'm curious if the barriers that were identified in the 2020-2022, that first column that I see there, is that what was used to inform the planned implementation based upon what barriers were identified?
So, yes. So Mr. Smith looked at some of those. I want to clarify though, when I ask you your question, are you saying the barriers for hiring or the barriers for students coming back into the educational field?
The barriers for recruiting and retaining diverse staff.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So from the original planning of the strategic plan, they identified some of the barriers, and we're still working because unfortunately, we know that a lot of the biggest piece of the barriers that we need people to go into the educational studies within colleges. So that's one piece of it why Dr. Raimundos is trying to work with Temple and see what they do, and also trying to connect with HBCUs to really inform the work to move forward, because that's the biggest hurdle is marketing, why it's such a great thing for us to have teachers come back into this area, but also that we diversify those students who are coming in. So that is one of the ways we're identifying barriers, but also, as Dr. Mundo said, next week looking at having our Ford's Career Networking Fairs, just the barrier is not knowing a place not knowing if it's a great place to work, not having the invitation to come in and see who we are. So a lot of this work is just looking at who are we as Haverford, you're welcome here, and actually celebrating ourselves in the work that we're doing so that other people know as well. I don't know.
Yeah,
if you
and
wanna-
and just building relationships,
Mm-hmm.
just getting to know us. We might not have something right now for you, but, we have your number, we have your contact information, and we want them to feel welcome leaving, working with us and walking away knowing they know about Haverford.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yep, Rob. All right, so next up, we have our priority 3. We have Mrs. Heather Pinheiro from us, our assistant principal from the high school, and Alicia Miller, one of our teachers at Chatham Park.
Thank you for having us. We have priority number 3, which is culturally responsive teaching and practices, and our goal is to ensure belonging and dignity-based culturally responsive teaching approaches and differentiated strategies are utilized in our classrooms during instructional time.
We had the opportunity to kind of look at some of the things that we've implemented previously and then look at all the work that we're doing this year, which we'll update you on just very briefly, and then also set some goals for moving forward. Now, through our curriculum updates that we've had, curriculum and texts were selected that shared a diverse background that provided both mirrors and windows for our students, that reflected our learners and our others' diverse backgrounds. In addition, this year we've implemented learning from Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain by Zaretta Hammond, and all campuses will continue to guide learning moving forward using this text into the upcoming school year as we have used it this school year as well.
And to round out our priority 3, through continued professional development, staff training, teacher observations, and implementation of School Code 49, we will continue our focus on culturally responsive instructional strategies in our classrooms on all of the buildings at Haverford.
Thank you to these 2 ladies. They have really been working really hard, and hard saying they're also trying to recruit people onto their committee because they have been doing a lot of the work together. But they really are trying to make it so that every classroom really understands what it means to have culturally relevant instruction and continuing to work and make sure that it is across all areas. I know I've had conversations with them and definitely know that they're passionate about what they do. So thank you. For our last priority, we have Cameron Bush, who's here from Chatham Park. She's representing her committee this evening because our other individuals are also being parents, so we like to honor them as they're being parents to their families. So.
Thanks, Christina. Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to share the priority 4 committee work centered around student voice and family engagement. The goal of this subcommittee is, using the data from the psychological sense of school membership scales, each building will identify their top 2 areas of need and develop an action plan to increase students' sense of belonging. Building equity teams will analyze results of their PSSM data on an annual basis, aligning building equity work with areas that indicate a need for additional focus. Each building will develop a focus group consisting of students representative of diverse sociocultural backgrounds to additionally inform building needs in relation to student belonging. Buildings will engage in school community conversations regarding cultural experiences. In addition, we'll build upon the Cultural Holidays newsletter that is currently implemented as a way for teachers to culturally engage with students, and each school will plan a cultural engagement event for students and families to attend each year.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And they definitely, their committee, it's more than one person, but they definitely meet and have very passionate conversations. If you know Dr. Whitehead, you know he's one of the leaders on the committee. He's always very, very passionate about this work and what they're doing and making sure that all students feel like they belong and that there's some voice, and making sure our families understand that they also have a place within our communities as well at our schools. So thank you so much. So what are our next steps? So right now, we're going to continue executing our implementation steps. There's things that we're currently already in the works of doing, and then we're going to continue to map out what we're going to do moving forward over the next 2 years, because we know we can't do everything in 1 year. So how can we decide and prioritize which items happen in which year as we lead up to it? But we also know that it doesn't mean you're going to accomplish everything. In this plan, they may continue to grow as we continue to move the plan forward. We know that this work has to be slow and steady so that we fully make sure we do it well for our students and our staff. Our leadership teams are going to also hear about this in our building equity teams coming up soon to see the actual action plan and implementation steps and see how they're involved in the process. And then our priority subcommittees are going to work with them to see how they can help them implement the steps that they're involved in as well. We're going to continue ensuring that our instructional practices are aligned to PA School Code 49 requirements, which many of you are probably aware of and have heard of at this point, about requiring us to make sure that we have culturally relevant instruction and that we include things within our induction, but we know that things are always ever changing, so we're going to continue to align with what has been put in place for the school code. And lastly, we want to make sure that with anything that we do, we are prioritizing funds that go to it. We know we can't do everything for free, but we are going to make sure that within each of our budgets, in which we already do, I don't want you to think we haven't done that. You've heard throughout the budget process, a lot has gone into what we do, but we in each of our departments want to make sure that we're supporting this work and continue to further it as we move along. So we want to just thank you so much for really just giving us the opportunity to share our work. As you can tell, our team is proud of what they have developed. We'll continue to work to ensure that diversity is celebrated, inclusion is more than a word but an action, and that every student, staff member in our community feel like they belong when coming into our schools, buildings, or even riding our buses. So thank you so much.
I would just like to echo what Ms. Carter had said. This is a lot of labor, and if it falls on one person, it can become almost practically impossible. So I just want to thank all of you for the work that you and your teams are doing, so that it is a collective, and it feels like it's a collective joyous effort instead of being labor that feels like burden. So I just really appreciate all of you doing what probably is a little bit above and beyond what you would your job is asking of you, and that is such a gift for our district. So thank you for all of your labor and work on this.
Great, thank you.
And thank you for taking the time to come tonight to present. And I just wanted to lift up how, as always, the presentations are so thoughtful, and they show the, you know, the steps, the process, the planning that goes into this. But I think it was such a great demonstration of the extent to which these strategic goals, you know, that were formulated and kind of crystallized just not that long ago, are so embedded and infused in the school operations, the school culture, that it's, you know, you see it at all the different levels, and how each aspect of this does, like, maybe isn't stated, but it is looking at or contributing to academic success, the teachers and the staff that we have to generate the academic environment and student achievement, and, you know, thinking of the families and, like, just the whole, you know, way that this goal has taken off and really shown up in so many facets of the work and been embraced by the staff is a really great thing to see. And thanks for laying out all the work that's been done and giving us a preview of what's to come.
No problem, thank you. I'm very fortunate to be working with these individuals.
Thank you so much for the presentation tonight. It was very interesting. I just have a question.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of priority 3, it said under the 2020, the 2022 previously implemented, utilized a curriculum textbook evaluation tool. Can you explain to me what that is?
Mm-hmm. Actually, I'm not even going to put the words in someone else's mouth because we have somebody here who could speak directly to it. So I'm going to ask Mrs. Connolly, can you come up and share just just a little bit of what that tool looks like? Because she's done a lot of work around it. Thank you for stepping in, please.
Hey, everyone. So we have a textbook evaluation tool that we've been using with our social studies audit. We've used it. We don't really have very many textbooks for English, but we've used it in our world language audit. And those different, the tool has all different types of components of it, of looking for the different standards that are being addressed, the representation of all different groups of people in that. And one of the things we look for when we found an audit tool, which we didn't develop it, we adjusted a little bit to add some AP questions and things like that when we were looking at AP textbooks. But we were trying to find an evaluation tool that would help us to be able to look in a very quantitative way at the different textbooks that are available out there, so that we could then have a rubric. And I don't have it with me. I think there's 36 questions or something. There's many areas that we're looking at in this rubric. And it helps teachers to go through and say, to what extent is this represented? And so one section of it has to do with diversity and inclusion. The other sections have to do with, you know, all the rest of the material that we have to look at in a textbook. And I'm happy to give you, you know, get a copy and send that to you.
So is this something, so you said for textbooks, it's not used for literary novels, it's only used for textbooks?
It, you know, it hasn't really, it doesn't lend itself very much to novels, but we've decided that with our audit process, we will be using a book evaluation tool as we go through that. So I think we can look at the textbook evaluation tool and say, okay, what of these things relate to a novel that we can pull forward and use next year in our audit?
So it hasn't been used for novels yet, but you're planning to use it in the future,
Correct. In the past, when we looked at novels, we didn't have that specific tool. We were looking for these things in novels, which is why some of our books changed 7 years ago when we did our last audit.
I think also board members might remember that several months ago, when we approved a history book.
Yes.
You brought that tool in,
I did.
and we all were able to look at it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they complete it for each, you know, for each textbook that they're looking at, and then I present those to you.
Yeah, and I remember you being able to provide for us
Yes.
the review of each of the textbooks and why the one we approved was the one that teachers recommended.
Exactly.
So for something like when you're using this tool with novels, so is the district, when they're using these tools to look at textbooks or novels, is this something, this determination is just done by the district administration? There's no outside, like, does the district bring in like
The
people?
teachers
The
complete the
teachers.
rubric.
The
who teach
teachers.
the course.
The teachers do the evaluation.
Yeah.
Right, there's no outside, I've heard like Sage Wellness maybe have been involved with some curriculum, is that, no, or is that?
There was a different situation when Sage Wellness was included in a process that we had, but it wasn't about an evaluation to adopt a textbook, which is what this is talking about, the textbook adoption tool.
So this is only for new materials then, not for, you're saying, I didn't make that distinction, that,
We have, as we've been using it over the last 7 years, I think was the first time we used it. We have been using it with new materials, but one of the things we have been discussing, you know, this is our second time through now with an audit, and one of the things we have been discussing is, should we be running like our current books through these as we go through as well? Because, you know, maybe they don't meet them the way we thought they did, or we hadn't evaluated them for that in the past. So it's definitely a step that we have talked about taking. You know, as Sandy said, we don't have one from the outside world for evaluating novels yet, but that is going to be part of our process for as we go through. And we'll just sort of evaluate the ones we're currently using, and then the proposed ones that come from teachers as well. And then we'll be able to sort of compare and contrast, which is what we've done with different versions of textbooks, but now we'll be able to do it as we.
I think I kind of combined two questions, the tool being
Yeah.
one, and then how much when
Yeah.
we evaluate textbooks, we rely on outside sources.
Yeah, typically this textbook rubric document that we're talking about, since we've started using it, it's always been the teachers who complete the rubrics. They actually do, you know.
They make the
little team of
recommendations,
teachers.
they complete the rubrics, they bring forward, you know, why. I mean, I can present to them what the publishers have, but I'm not a textbook writer. So, you know, I bring the textbooks forward, they review them. We have at least 3 teachers usually who are reviewing these textbooks, so that we have a variety of perspectives and, you know, different levels of experience and that sort of thing. And then they bring their recommendation to us, and we listen to that.
So I get all that, they review the teacher recommendations, but as Ms. Sachs has said before, sometimes you override, then the teacher.
I wouldn't say sometimes, I would say in the circumstance that I described.
Is that
we did.
typical that we override the teacher recommendation? I'm just curious.
So in the instance that I described.
Yes. Is that
all of the decisions that we've made, that one instance is where that applies.
That
when
was
it-
like a one-time thing.
When it, because of the circumstances as we described them. But every time we brought a textbook rubric to you as a board and, to the boards prior, that has always been the total is done. It's all calculated by the teachers, completed by the teachers. They write a narrative and they total it up. And we go with, I don't think there's ever been a time when we haven't gone with their recommendation that I can
No, we haven't,
recall.
and we've agreed with their recommendation. I mean, we do have the ability to look at it and say, have you considered this, or have you considered that?
Or explain your thinking on this,
exactly.
or, yeah. We have a conversation with them, but not that I can recall that we did not have the same recommendation they did.
Interesting, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Connolly, for hopping in. Questions? All right, thank you so much, everyone.
Great, and Christina will be back as she introduces the technology, but Sandy is also gonna be back because we're now gonna move on to, if you didn't get comfortable there.
Team, come on up.
Our Modernizing Assessment Committee is here.
And thank you to the folks who have been part of the presentation and are heading out.
Yes, we appreciate your time.
All right. So thank you for welcoming us, the Modernized Assessments Committee, and we're actually the sort of 2.0 version of the Preparing Contemporary Citizens Committee. We are also part of the Preparing Contemporary Citizens goal, and what we're focusing on this year was modernized assessments. And these are three of our members. We have more members who are also going to be speaking on video, and we'll try to keep it moving because I know it's a long night for everybody. I have here Lauren Schaefer, Karen Shandelman, and Jen Corcoran, who are visiting with us today. And this is the rest of the committee. So you can see we have both Christina Carter, Jen Sachs are on this committee, so is Pete Donaghy, all these people who are here today, and then a whole lot of other people who are either on video or who couldn't make it tonight, or who are involved. So we have representatives across the district in all schools, and the district-wide level of Haverford Online and that sort of thing. So why are we even considering modernized assessment? Our goal was to identify how we will expand and modernize assessment opportunities to prepare citizens for a contemporary world. And that's how you can see it connects into our Preparing Contemporary Citizens goal. We wanted to learn, and so we started and collected what we already were doing in school. You're going to hear some of those results. We read the research to see what other exemplary districts were doing, and also reading the research of what is published out there about this topic. We talked to students, teachers, parents, guardians, community members. It's important to recognize that we're not getting rid of traditional assessments. So we want everybody to feel okay about that. We need to keep some of those traditional assessments. Of course, students are still taking multiple choice tests. And we want to make sure that they feel comfortable with that. And that is a very quick and easy way for teachers to find out what students know and are able to do. But we also want to expand that view beyond just the multiple choice test. We're going to do it during the curriculum cycle. You'll hear more about that. And the Curriculum Writing Committee will develop modern assessments as part of the curriculum framework. So finally, each curriculum will be revised to include modernized assessments that engage learners and prepare them for the future. So this is our process. And you can look through, I just sort of described all these things. This is what has been happening this year. We've been very busy. I'll let you just take a look at it on the screen. So I basically have told you all these things, but the internal audit is one of the things that we're going to talk a lot about, and the focus groups, and that's what you're going to hear about soon. And then this summer, we're hoping to develop some competencies by grade band, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So here are the results. We did a teacher survey, and one of the questions that they were asked was, in what format are the current summative assessments for your course? And I just want to draw your attention to this question, because it says summative assessments, and we think that there might have been some confusion even in that language. What is a summative assessment? Okay, here you can see the assessments that teachers report are currently in their curriculum. And some of these assessments, like multiple choice and essays, are built in their curriculum. So more teachers report using them because that's what we gave them to do, or that's what they developed as curriculum teams. We reflect that perhaps there are more oral presentations and projects, but teachers didn't consider them summative assessments. So maybe they didn't say, yes, we're doing oral presentations, but that's not a summative assessment. Maybe. We don't know for sure because we couldn't ask them since it's a survey. For lab reports, teachers report they do experimentation, but teachers may currently not include a formal report for the project, so maybe they didn't think it was a summative assessment. So there are things that we're reflecting on even as how we ask the questions. We wondered about why some of these more creative assessments, demonstrations, choice boards, debates, Socratic seminars, collaborative group work, and performance or product, why there weren't more of those. Is it possible that teachers may have considered a debate an oral presentation? And so, that double dipping may have splintered those reports, the votes. We also wondered if teachers need some professional learning opportunities to learn more about these different types of activities. Maybe they don't know how to do a Socratic seminar, and we want to be able to teach them that type of thing. So we're going to hear more about our teachers' feedback in our focus groups now as we go forward. And so if you're not sure, a focus group is just when we take a demographic of stakeholders and we put them together in a group, and either we get them together in a room or for instance, we did that with the Ed Foundation. Jen and I met with the Ed Foundation and we were able to get them in a room and ask them some questions. And for another stakeholder group, you'll hear Megan Maligan went around and she talked to all these different people that she knew in the community who were a variety of different professions so that she could get a variety of input. So the first one we're going to hear from is Megan Maligan, and she's going to talk about our community responses from that focus group. And while she's speaking, while these different speakers are speaking, you can also look at the text that's on the screen because that will also help you to follow along with what they're saying.
Good evening. My name is Megan Maligan, and I work with our K-12 Haverford online programming. Thank you for letting us present tonight. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person. In our group, my role was to interview community members to find out what they think our graduates need. I spoke to people in all different lines of work. This included people that work in healthcare, people that work in various industries within project management, financial fields, union trades people, just to name a few. After speaking with our community pool, I was able to gather some information, bring it back to our team, and this is a summary of the skills that we found our community feels our graduates need. Some of them include high motivation, problem solving, critical thinking, clear and professional communication, the ability to connect with people, promptness, understanding community objectives and goals, being able to present themselves effectively through self-assurance, being able to be proficient in word processing, presentation skills, as well as being able to read spreadsheets, the ability to interpret data, leadership, and the ability to have proper socialization, as well as team management, to be able to work under different management styles. Other specific work habits include multitasking, making inferences and connections with limited information, making quick but informed decisions, effective communication, being able to present themselves when they're concerned, public speaking abilities, as well as working in a team environment, embracing diversity of thought and collaboration, setting realistic expectations, demonstrating diligence, exhibiting group leadership, showcasing adaptability, and navigating different platforms to present information effectively. In regards to assessment, it's important for us to give students the opportunity to hone in on their presentation skills, demonstrating different effects of communication, group presentations, being able to provide roundtables or peer interviewing and teaching opportunities, engage students in discussions to articulate and justify decisions, being able to present various styles and modes for our students, providing adaptable formats, and be able to work in group projects that foster collaboration, decision-making, are all essential that the community feels for student success. Thank you.
And we have Jen Corcoran here in person who can tell us a little bit more. if there's anything left.
I mean, a lot, right? Yeah, it was great. We had a great conversation with the Haverford Ed Foundation. It was really inspiring just to hear from people in all walks of life. I mean, I spend my days with 21 6 and 7-year-olds, so it was really amazing to hear about what they thought our students should graduate with. Two of the things that really stuck out to me were analytics, because that's just outside of my current field, and I thought that was a really cool thing because I do that a lot, right? We analyze data, of course, in all fields. That's going to be something that our students need to do. And then communication skills and writing, it really stood out to us as a need, and we're going to, continue it from the ground floor up.
Exactly.
So,
Thanks,
thank you.
Jen. So Jen's coming to us from Coopertown. So next, nope, I think I clicked her. Mistake, thank you. Next, we're going to hear from Lauren Schaefer, who's our math coach, one of our math coaches, and she's going to tell us about what she learned from the parents and guardians. So Lauren.
Thank you. So similar to Jen's work with the community, I met with parents and guardians to ask them what they felt or what skills and dispositions they feel are most important for our students in order to succeed in the future. And I also asked very similarly what types of assessments they feel best demonstrate their children's skills and knowledge. Their responses were very similar as well to the community ones, and I think you'll hear a lot of repeated characteristics and skills and hopes here and in the following focus groups as well. The parents and guardians highlighted the benefits of using a variety of different types of assessments, from project-based to our traditional paper and pencil, even to assessments such as our standardized ones and our norm reference ones like MAP Growth. They feel that assessments that include student choice are really the ones where students are best able to express and communicate what they've learned, their skills, their knowledge, because they can do it in a way that really utilizes their strengths or even in a form that they feel most confident in. So again, we can kind of, pull the knowledge from them because they have a better opportunity for that. Regarding skills and dispositions, again, in addition to just overall strong academics, of course, the parents and guardians responded that they want to see students making stronger real-world connections through hands-on experiences, authentic, really well-developed hands-on experiences. They want to see their students, again, very similar to the community group, developing proficiency in time management skills, the use of technology, creative problem solving, critical thinking, collaborating and working within teams, and with leadership skills. Their responses also emphasize the importance of helping our students to develop self-advocacy skills and adaptability, flexibility, kindness, respect, and a growth mindset. So together with these responses, with those of the other focus groups, I really think we're seeing a strong foundation built here, supporting the characteristics that you're going to see that our committee is now going to use to actually describe what we feel modernized assessments would look like. Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren. All right. Our third focus group so Justin Harris, Ashley Gavio, Katie Carney, Christy DiValero, and Karen Shilneman spoke with our teachers. So we have, 7 buildings, lots and lots of teachers. Let's hear what Justin and Ashley tell us about what some of our teachers thought. So we're going to hear from Justin first.
Hello, my name is Justin Harris, a science teacher at the high school. I spoke with a group of other high school teachers, 2 math, 1 science, an English, and a social studies teacher. This group teaches or has taught every grade level and course level up to and including AP classes. The biggest highlight of my findings was that every department in the high school represented in my group is already using modern assessment tools. The teachers listed many labs, activities, real-world applications, debates, projects, cartoons, and many others, all of which align with the goals of the Modernizing Assessments Committee. All of these show the teachers what the students have learned, but they are usually put in the 20% grade category as they are not common assessments. Teachers may have considered these projects as assignments rather than assessments. The teachers with whom I spoke are all excited to work with their PLCs and departments during and beyond their curriculum review to standardize and develop what they are already doing in the classroom to align with what we may consider to be an assessment moving forward. This could be developing common rubrics or evaluating how grades can better align with student learning. Everyone expressed a desire for two things from administration: clear communication of goals and outcomes, and time that is specifically set aside to work as PLCs on these goals. Thank you.
Now we're going to hear from Ashley. Oh, I can't click that. You do it. Ashley Gavio, who's from the middle school.
Hello, my name is Ashley Gavio. I am one of the middle school representatives for the Modernizing Assessment Committee, and I hosted the middle school teacher focus group. Our group consisted of a sampling of 10 core content area teachers across grades 6 through 8. The group is excited to get together to talk about assessments, as we all agree that assessments are a vital component for understanding student learning. In the group, teachers emphasize the importance of using a variety of assessments, including both project-based assessments and traditional paper pencil assessments, including formative assessments and summative assessments. The group discussed the fact that while our current assessments are definitely effective for evaluating many of our students, there's certainly room for growth and improvement. At the middle school, currently efforts are underway to align content-based assessments with skill-based benchmarks, and the results are being scored and analyzed in performance matters to determine student progress during PLC time. The teachers believe that these current assessments are preparing students for the future through critical thinking and real-world application questions. However, there were concerns about the format of these assessments, as they're mostly multiple choice, and teachers wondered about their relevance to the initiative to create more modernized assessments. The teachers voiced concerns about how we can maybe start to marry these two initiatives together while addressing challenges in the classroom like time constraints. But nonetheless, teachers were very interested in refining their assessments to meet the needs of students and to see how we can allow students to show their understanding and skills in new ways. And people were open to the possibility of exploring, especially in the areas of social studies and science courses. Thank you so much for letting us share our results with you, and we can't wait to see how the future of modernized assessments works in Haverford Township.
Our next group, focus group, is students. Of course, we have a lot of students, and Karen Schindelman is here. She's going to tell us about our students. We also had Marco Vittori. I just want to introduce the rest of your group. Come here. Marco Vittori, Kelly Lucas, who's from Chestnut Wald. Marco is from the high school. Karen Potres from the middle school, and Mike Berkheimer from the middle school. We're also part of this focus group, but Karen's going to share some thoughts about student responses.
Hi.
Some more. Yes.
So as you can see, the students definitely largely prefer to show what they've learned in more creative, modern ways. And like similar to what we saw with teachers and the community. They also feel that assessments like presentations, public speaking, posters, slideshows, writing projects, and essays are a really good chance for them to show what they've learned. And definitely using real world context is what they prefer. When choice is involved, the students loved that. And picking from a choice board was something they remarked as being preferred. They also remarked that traditional assessments are also important and helps prepare them for other tests that they would take. And their unit math tests definitely represent what they've learned. And yeah, so that's it.
That all aligns. I think we're finding some trends here, which is really great. And then the last group we're going to hear from is our exemplary districts. Mr. Donaghy talked to some people in the Central League. Miss Erin Smith-Dels is here. We're going to hear a video from her. She's our lead teacher for ELA. And Dr. Jeremy Tomaszewski also collected information from exemplary districts. So let's hear from Erin Smith-Dels.
Good evening. My name is Erin Smith-Dels, and my group interviewed exemplary districts both locally and nationally. When asked about what modern assessments look like in their schools, these districts use descriptors such as performance-based, tied to real-world applications, a picture of where students are now, braiding together of different disciplines, focused on fostering both skills and behaviors, and personalized to student voice and choice. Examples of these modern assessments are listed on the screen, and many exemplary districts share that they use rubrics to grade student work. With this type of grading, they admitted, there are both positives and pitfalls. They liked the autonomy it gave teachers and the picture it provided to parents and guardians about a student's progress. On the other hand, rubric-based grading, they said, requires clear communication of expected competencies, consistency in feedback, and time to help teachers transition to this type of scoring. It is worth it, though, many of them shared, because of the real-world preparation it provides for students. It helps students to see their learning as relevant while developing effective communication and critical thinking skills, and the ability to collaborate. When asked how they knew these assessments were working, all of the districts said it was evident in the students' motivation, their level of engagement, and the quality of their work when sharing their learning. It was also evident in their growth over time. Moving forward, we hope to continue this conversation with these districts, perhaps to collaborate in our learning about modernizing assessments and reflecting the skills and talents of all of our learners here in Haverford Township. Thank you for your time.
You can see we have a really great team, don't we? I'm so lucky. So what is modernized assessment at Haverford? So our team got together, and after listening to all of this and reading all the research and all the work we did, we came up with 4 characteristics. And we've had to put a couple together because we thought if there were 4, we might be able to remember them. You know how that is. The first one, and I don't know that we're married to these icons, but I thought it was helpful to have something. So student voice and choice. We heard that a lot, right? Produce real-world products and processes. I think I heard that a lot too. And then those modern skills of collaboration, communication, critical thinking, and creativity. And finally, promoting a global mindset, which totally ties in. And you can see that icon is actually our Preparing Contemporary Citizens icon, because we are trying to connect to the global world and be prepared for preparing our students for the global world. So, what are we going to do to get there? These are our anticipated action steps. One of our action steps is to develop a scope and sequence to describe each characteristic at each grade level with grade appropriate examples across content areas. And we're going to start that work at our next meeting and then in the summer and going forward. We'll include these characteristics as an element in the curriculum writing documents that we have and add them to a rubric to evaluate and select resources and assessments. We'll provide PD for curriculum writers in these modern characteristics and in rubric development. Finally, we'll identify and or develop at least one assessment per grading period that uses modern characteristics in each grade level. This will occur during the curriculum development step of our curriculum cycle. So as the high school teachers requested, there will be time to do that during our curriculum cycle as we go forward. Does anybody have any questions?
Sandy, I'd just like to note that the slide that you just showed, if you can go back to it.
Yeah.
We must have included like an old version of it. We don't have this slide in there. We have the action steps from the last time we presented to the board. So what's posted there, we'll make sure has this slide on it as opposed to the other one. So presenting it here tonight, we'll just make sure this is the correct one that's on the board docs.
On the board docs.
Yep.
Okay,
We'll
sorry that if it doesn't match. Does anyone have a question I can answer or try to answer, or our team can answer?
Not a question, but I was sitting here, and is it correct that our kindergartners are the class of 2035? Is that, I did a little chart here, so 2035, right? So that.
We can't imagine what that will be, right? What's 2035 going to be?
And I think that's it, right? Like, I love that the assessments is going to the ways in which our students will need to engage with each other, engage with the material, communicate and share and demonstrate, because none of it says, oh, there's going to be these 3 options available to you and you need to fit into one of those. It's just so much more open-ended, using information, communicating, collaborating, that I think will stand these class of 2035 kids well, that we're thinking now of, just the open-ended possibilities that they will have, jobs and careers that we can't even yet imagine. But from the community, parents and guardians, teachers, and the kids themselves hearing, the ways in which they want to demonstrate mastery and competence with material, sounds like, we'll be preparing them for who knows what they conjure up.
Yeah, it's actually interesting, if I can just interject, that we wondered at the beginning of this process if we would just discover there's some magic process that we'll just all adopt, like we'll all do design thinking, or we'll all do project-based learning, right? And what we heard from the teachers who were doing the research and, doing the learning and having the conversations was just as voice and choice is important for our students, it's important for each subject. It's important for the teachers. It's better to have sort of a list of competencies and say, okay, well, in first grade, that can look like this, and in second grade, that can look like this. So that's the goal. And that's why we didn't land on one specific thing, which then may be outdated in 5 years. It's more about sort of what are the skills that are needed now.
So within each one of the curriculum audit cycles, the assessments will almost come from a menu of this.
Exactly. And it'll sort of, be a part of the curriculum document to say, yes, these are the common assessments, and, sort of check off which kinds of skills are required for these assessments, and they meet the modern definition in these ways.
So similarly to what I said earlier, just thank you for all the work you're doing, because I know, again, it's above and beyond what you were required to do, and I just really appreciate the time of all of these different focus groups to gather this information. I have one just basic question. I'm pretty sure I know what this is, but I thought it might be worth it if someone does it. What are exit tickets?
Is anybody I love that.
It's just a quick assessment. An exit ticket would just be a quick 1-question, 2-question question that a student would answer before they walk out the door.
So like at the end of a lesson period, just to see if they grasp the concept. Exactly. That's what I thought it was, but I wanted to make sure.
Like this week, the exit ticket from my room was, can you match the coin to the value?
Yeah.
Right? Did you get the idea of the 3 lessons we did this week?
Wonderful. Thank you.
Do you do entry tickets too? Do you ever do entry tickets?
Do we do entry tickets?
Almost like a pre.
Yeah, like
Background knowledge.
yeah, or just how much did you remember from the last time we talked about this to like get
We do
like
a lot of anticipatory sets.
Between anticipatory sets, and then in the math program, they have application problems, and that usually is a bridge from the previous lesson to the current lesson and fluency practice. So you kind of get just a very, very quick sense of what kind of prior knowledge they have coming in, or how much they've retained from the day before.
That's great. That's great.
Were there any surprises?
I don't think I was surprised, but I was validated that writing seemed to be at the root of very much of this. Because as we're about to enter this ELA audit, I know Ms. Saxon knows I've been struggling with what's this going to look like in English language arts. It's easier maybe to do a project or a lab in science or a project in social studies, but in an elementary ELA classroom, what might that look like? And it seems like that all of our stakeholder groups were saying that writing was an important piece to them, where they could demonstrate their knowledge through writing. And so that might be writing to prepare to do something like an infographic or a podcast or a slideshow, but that there was writing behind it all. And so I was sort of validated to hear that. I was like, okay, that fits for ELA.
And all these things there was nothing strikingly new. And we've been hearing these same lists of skills and approaches for a long time. One thing that struck me, it's nice to have it presented in this fashion and to be able to put that framework on the rest of the work that we do. But when I look at the slide that had the assessment at Haverford, the characteristics of the 4 categories, and I think of what we're doing in our schools this month, which is Keystone exams, PSSAs, AP exams. It's a totally different approach to things, and I just wonder how much longer we're going to keep doing those kinds of assessments that impact us so heavily. As I take my glide path towards December, when I'm not going to be a school board member any longer, You know, I've not been a fan of standardized tests for 24 years. And I'm still not. I understand there's a role for them, but I think so much of what we do has been determined by people on committees in Washington and Harrisburg. And I've always felt that our teachers and our administrators should be empowered. I respect them as professionals, and I value the work that they do. So thanks for this. I know a lot of work went into it.
You're welcome. Can I just throw something in really quick? I love your comment about writing, and I'm gonna put on my professor hat for a second. I teach a lot of writing intensive classes, and one of the things that always strikes me when I teach them is that it's really different from other kinds of classes where they might do writing, because in many of the classes that students take at the college level, but probably also in K-12 as well, they do writing assignments and then they get a grade and then that's done and then we move on to the next thing. And I do think a really important thing about the kinds of classes I teach that are writing intensive is we go through a really extensive drafting process and they have to get feedback, respond to the feedback, make changes. Part of it is doing presentations of what it is they're doing research on or what it is they're writing about, so it's kind of like mixing all of that. But the one thing that I always hear from students is, at the college level at least, is oh, we've never actually gotten a lot of feedback on our writing and been forced to make changes, right? And so that's something as we're thinking about different ways, and it could be during presentations or it could be lots of different ways where you get the feedback and you actually have to respond to it to make changes. And then you kind of do it all again, right? So that drafting iterative process. And I do think that that's much of what we do in the real world is that iterative process, right? How many times have we seen the budget, right? It's a process, right? Everything is a process. And so as we're thinking about more kinds of writing and presentation, getting that feedback and then responding to it to make changes and do it all again, I'd love to see us think about that a little bit. Because I do think there's a lot of value in doing that. So just my 2 cents.
Yeah, one of the mindset approaches.
Yeah, and
too,
it's a growth. I think it's a
criticism.
Yeah, receive feedback and improve. Yeah, and I think it's all part of it. It goes to a growth mindset as well. Yeah, and I think you get reflecting on your own work and making changes. It definitely makes you think about your learning differently. So just my 2 cents on that, but this is so much hard work has gone into this, so thank you all so much for that.
With an awareness that tomorrow is career day at the middle school.
I know, I'm going to career day at the middle school.
Maybe for a future theme or thread for career day presenters is to talk about, in what way they demonstrate the knowledge or their work. Is it written, is it oral presentations, is it teamwork, and just try to link it to the assessments and the projects and things that students are familiar with and see that they'll be carrying those skills forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of like you mentioned, the writing, a lot of what I do is analytics, but then I also write about my analysis. And so that's what I get students doing is we're not just creating the graphs or the charts or running the regressions, but we're also writing about what we're finding. So it's putting it all together, and doing each piece individually is great, but putting it all together, I think is so much, is more, right? 1 + 1 is more than 2, right? That sort of, that sort of learning. So, I like that we're thinking about different ways where we can incorporate writing throughout the curriculum, not just in ELA, but everywhere. We can put it everywhere because it is really important. So I love that.
Thank you.
Okay, 2 of 4. All right, up next, Mr. Rob Anderson. Christina will introduce Rob, I think. Yeah.
So I have the privilege of being able to work with Mr. Rob Anderson, our Director of Technology. He's coming to give an update on the technology alignment review that happened, not too long ago, before a little mini world event that happened. Nothing major, but he's going to come and bring forth what that looked like and where we're going to go from here with it. So,
thank you. As Christina mentioned, I'm going to talk about a review that was done of the technology department right before COVID and everything like that. what I thought was a good place to start was just kind of an overview of what the process was. We worked with the Chester County Intermediate Unit, and during the spring and summer of 2019, they came in and spoke with a number of staff. They had us collect a lot of documents from the technology department that they reviewed. And then I walked them through our buildings so that they could kind of see the technology that we have in place in our both in our classrooms as well as offices and data closets. They had kind of three guiding questions as they worked with us through that. You know, the first one was just how is technology aligned to the district plan and goals? How is it aligned to the district level systems, and processes and procedures aligned with the technology department itself? So it was mostly just looking at our processes and procedures across those three areas. So after they collected all of that information and kind of went back, they had a team that sat down and reviewed the documents, the outcome of those interviews. I believe they had some follow-up questions with us about specific items afterwards. And then they produced a nice report for us that focused on, you know, what they identified as 6 major areas. They both produced some findings and then some recommendations for each one of those 6 areas, and there was a couple of sub-items underneath those. Predominantly they were around business functions, things like that, the actual functions of the department, and then, as was mentioned in the guiding questions, just alignment with other departments within the district. So what I thought would be a good place to start with was the recommendations that they provided at the end of that review, and then kind of where we are as far as our current status with each of those steps within the within these recommendations. One of the recommendations that they had was to fill the senior network administrator position that was vacant at the time. We hired that ironically right after lockdown happened. I think that was June of 2020. That allowed us to have somebody who was dedicated to just managing all of our networks and servers and everything like that, that kind of behind the scenes runs everything that our staff and students use. Addition to that, they did another walkthrough with me of our buildings to kind of review our infrastructure. So that's the network equipment, the servers, the physical locations they're in, as well as remotely, you know, kind of reviewing the configurations and setups of those systems, to similarly provide some guidance and recommendations across those systems. Another recommendation was to develop a formal plan. We kind of an informal plan of how we went about refreshing equipment and when certain pieces of equipment got refreshed. Their recommendation was to kind of formalize that in a plan that we would then follow moving forward, so that, you know, there was no guesswork in what got replaced when. And then the last recommendation was to look across the department and both reorganize the department as well as some of the responsibilities, shift them from certain staff to others. So as part of that was some shifting of some responsibilities with staff members from a role, you know, in one of our buildings to overseeing all of our technology applications, as well as providing some, prior to that, the department basically was, everyone reported to the director, was providing some more levels to that department so that people had someone easier to reach out to than everyone reaching out to the same person at the same time. So then there's other recommendations that we've, you know, we're at various levels of completion. First one we'll talk about goes back to Mrs. Carter's presentation and her team at the beginning, was just supporting the goal 3 of diversity and inclusion. Part of that was us looking at, and this, again, conveniently was right before COVID, was looking at access to technology and internet for our families at home. So obviously that was looked at just prior to COVID, and then very in-depthly during lockdown and hybrid learning. We looked at that very closely. I put that as kind of partially completed, and I don't know that it's one that'll ever be fully completed because it's a kind of an ongoing process of reviewing the applications and everything we use for all the things that we're looking at through that goal 3 of diversity and inclusion, just to ensure that they're supporting that goal. The other another recommendation that's predominantly completed is a systems inventory and procurement procedure. So we had numerous inventories across multiple different systems for all of the equipment, and their recommendation was, including software. So their recommendation was to kind of combine all of that into one place so that it was easier to manage, as well as developing then a procedure on how we purchase applications and software, or no, same thing, and hardware and network equipment, things like that. So obviously the inventory piece has all been condensed under our information system. We're in various stages of implementing that procurement procedure. On the hardware side, we've got a pretty solid procedure going there. The software side needs a little more revising. Restructuring the technology budget to align with educational priorities. So this was, in large part, again, referenced back to the need for a kind of a refresh cycle. So to ensure that our teachers had the equipment they needed to perform the instruction, that the equipment on the back end to support that instruction was in place. The other part of that recommendation, which is why that one's not fully completed, is just kind of a subsequent review of all of the applications that we have in the district, just to make sure that there's not significant overlap within those, and there's not any that aren't being as widely used as we expect, and maybe we can refine how many licenses we purchase for those and things like that. And then the last partially completed recommendation was to use Data Fresh services, what we use for all of our incident tickets. So if you're a parent who's ever emailed the IT help desk for assistance with anything, it ultimately ends up in Fresh service, and that's how a member of our team will be able to get back to you to help with either a student's device, your parent portal, or anything else. And it's also how all of our staff submit requests for help through the tech department. So their recommendation was just to further leverage the data that we have within that system, as well as establishing an SLA. So an SLA is basically, it's short for a service level agreement. So basically what it is it's an agreement between us and our staff and parents as far as when they put a request in, how long it'll take before we get back to them, and then how long before that issue should be resolved. That was the last step. We've actually taken steps just even in the past couple weeks to try and get that firmed up with our staff as far as what those expectations are from me with them, and then starting to look into that to make sure that those expectations are being met for all of our staff and parents and students. So what's left? There was kind of three major areas, or three areas that weren't able to be addressed as of yet. And basically they all, at the end of the day, come down to creating a district technology plan, focusing on the instructional use of technology, and then using that to create a strategic vision of how we use technology in the district. As an outcome of that, the plan would be to then create a committee, like a technology advising committee, that would allow us to, even after the tech plan, to be able to work with those groups to see how's our tech plan going. The things that we're expecting to work well, are they working? Do we need to revise anything? Is anything new come out that maybe we need to look at to replace something that's, technology changes every day. So, if the plan would be 3 years. So we'll do our best to anticipate 3 years out. But when we get to that third year, it's possible that we have to kind of shift and maybe go in a different direction if things have changed substantially. Ironically, we, again, had started to develop this committee. We had started to invite members, collect data for this right before lockdown happened, and then it was obviously put on pause for the next couple of years, and thankfully we're getting to start to do this work now as we move into next school year. So, like I said, the plan would be to start to develop this district technology plan. We'll want to, similar to the district strategic plan, we'll want to have stakeholders from staff, parents, teachers, principals, everyone that uses or is impacted by our technology to be part of that development of that plan. As part of that, we would look to work with an outside agency to just kind of advise us through that process. Haverford's done technology plans in the past, but it's been a few years, so other entities that have more recent experience with guiding people through that would be helpful. We use that to, again, like I said, mentioned, the primary focus will be on the instructional technology side, so we'll look to some outside standards and things to make sure that we're doing, similar to what Ms. Connolly said, what needs to be done for our students as they prepare to enter the workforce or college or whatever they choose to do after Haverford. Additionally, as part of that would be the operational technology that to support all of the instructional needs. So just to make sure we have everything we need for that. And then we're planning to start working through the kickoff of that through this summer. And then, like I mentioned, we would develop a plan that would be a 3-year technology plan. Are there any questions?
I have one, maybe 2 questions.
Okay.
So when I'm looking at the collaboration piece, and I recognize it's the idea that the plan would cover 3 years, and we know that things change with technology pretty rapidly. So just for clarification, is it 3 years once this team is developed, or is there not a team quite developed yet?
There's not a team quite developed yet.
Okay.
So we would develop the plan, and it would be 3 years from when we start. So the plan would cover 3 years.
Okay.
So it wouldn't be from the inception of the group or the
Okay.
team. It would be from when the team's done the planning. They would create a plan that then covers 3 years from that point forward.
Got you. So then my follow-up question would be, is there already a process in place to develop that team, or is that going to take longer than potentially what's expected? Do we have to start looking for people tomorrow, or are there already people? The summer's coming, that's why I'm asking.
No, I think, like I mentioned, working with the outside firm, they'll be helpful in identifying who we need to have on that team. How many members makes, it's kind of a balance between how many people do you have on the committee. We'll have subcommittees within that, so it's kind of developing that whole team and making sure we don't have too many people. At the same time, we don't want to have too few voices. So that's where we'll kind of work with them to figure out what makes sense for a technology plan as what that number looks like and who are the important stakeholders to have there.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe not for on the team as you're describing it, but I would suggest, I didn't see students on there, and I know in my household, our 11th grader is like our personal IT help desk. Like, these kids know so much about the technology and how they use it and what's next. So hopefully getting a chance for students to weigh in and see how they're using the technology for their education.
Of course, and I apologize for my omission on there, because obviously we would include students. Before COVID, when we started developing the team, we had identified, I think, 4 students that were going to be on the committee.
Great.
We
Yeah,
can't do it without who we have right here tonight, so.
Did I miss if you mentioned already, who's the outside firm that you're going to be utilizing, or you have not identified?
We haven't
them
picked
yet?
that. We're talking with a few different people just to kind of get who will provide what we want. A lot of firms want to come in and just talk to us and then hand us something, and that's not how we want to develop this plan. We want to develop the plan through collaboration with our team and our employees and staff and parents and everyone feeling like they have buy-in and a voice in the plan, as opposed to just maybe a 15-minute interview with someone and then they hand us something.
Great.
I've been kind of chomping at the bits for this to come up for our use of technology and I'm actually going to call it the overuse of technology in our schools, particularly in our elementary schools. And I guess I just have a lot of concerns. I have a sophomore, I have an 8th grader, and I have a 3rd grader. And my 8th grader was in 5th grade in 2020, so the lockdown year. So I know quite well how Linwood Elementary functioned in terms of their technology use. I think each grade had like a cart of iPads. The younger grades might use them for like a reflex math program. Once they would use them to do informational reports. And our whole landscape has completely changed. I mean, it does not look the same. And I don't necessarily think that's a good thing. I can remember quite clearly with both of my older sons, they both had the same third grade math teacher, the wonderful Mrs. Wolf, who's now, I believe, at the high school. And, you know, I know how her class ran. She gave great teaching. They did some individual work, breakout groups. And then there was always a folder, some more extra work, challenge or bonus work. That's how it always was. And now I'm seeing with the current math curriculum, it's a significant portion on technology, which I am just, I mean, obviously you want children to know how to use technology. My third grader's already better than I am at technology, but I'm concerned. I understand why we went that route at first with the lockdown. It was a need. You know, that first year, that hybrid year, we didn't know what was going to happen. Were there going to be more shutdowns? Were they going to need to go back home? I get that, but I feel like we've now defaulted to that. And, you know, when I look math in particular, I think you really need to do it with paper and pencil, and a lot of it. I'm not saying, I mean, the Reflex Math program, which ironically is gone. I love that. But I'm looking at our math scores, and I know we were supposed to get comparison data. I never got it, so I pulled some up on my own. But the PSSA data for Linwood fifth grade last year in math, 51% of our kids were basic or below basic in math. That's my elementary school. That concerns me. And I did go up to Haverford Middle School math, and it's about 45% basic or below basic. Now, I understand test scores are down across the board, but then I look at Lower Merion, and they're only like 27% basic or below basic. Even Springfield is doing better, and I've had conversations. It's interesting. I've spoken to some parents at some of the top private schools in the area where there's a lot of really elite private schools around, and two parents were really kind to talk to me. They have a third and a fourth grader at the Haverford school. I talked to these two mothers, and it's interesting how little they do on technology at the elementary level. There is a weekly coding class, so I'm taking that out of the equation, but their math program, so it's not a matter of, oh, well, they're paying $40-some thousand for this. It's paper and pencils. We have that, and that's how we did run. And I just have a lot of concerns, not to mention the, American Academy of Pediatrics tells you limit screen time. Everyone knows eye strain, headaches. I've heard this from my son, particularly when they were on the Chrome tablets, the smaller screen. There's also more off-task behaviors. And I'm just wondering, I mean, I see you have develop a technology plan, including a focus on the instructional use of technology. And that to me would be one of the biggest priorities of our district. The attention we put into the diversity and inclusion presentation, that has to go to that too, because I have really big concerns about the overuse of technology. And if we were like crushing it with our tests, like look at our but we're not. And it's very striking to me, like when I think back of how there was like no technology, and my older two were so much more adept at math, and now I'm looking, it can be like half a class. I mean, like they finish a lesson and then they do Zern. Is it MobiMax? Maybe they could do everything extra. Nothing's on pencil. Nothing is on paper and pencil anymore. There's no books, yet the other schools do it that way, and I'm seeing better scores. And it's just something I really think we need to focus on, because
Sorry, but that is a question that we are asking ourselves, and an integral part of what's going to be reviewed. There are, even before we get this completed, there are some potential changes that have already taken place. There are some potential changes that we are looking to implement with the start of the new school year.
Okay.
But looking at, for the same purpose that you said, we did what we had to do in the time during which we had to do it.
Absolutely.
Do we stay on that path, or what do we, that's the question in looking at that. But we're not going to wait for 3 years to decide.
I mean,
we're making some incremental changes.
So that would have been the COVID, I'm trying to think, kindergarten shutdown, and I'm looking at it from a third grader. So I get that first grade, but now it's been 2 years of a lot of time on screens, and I'm just not seeing like the data to back it up that that's the way. And I think that really needs, I can't stress enough we really need to look at that, and that develop a technology plan, including focus on the use of instructional technology at the elementary school level. I think that has to be one of our top priorities as a district.
No, thank you. It's definitely something that we're going to continue to reevaluate and work together on it. as you see here, we have that we're going to really be looking at the ISTE standards as well as what those expectations are with instructional technology. I have to say though, and really just thank Mr. Anderson, and often I'll say they're the people who are invisible behind the scenes, who are our tech supports at each of our buildings across the district. They don't get enough thanks, and I really want to just thank you for leading them and thank them for all the hard work they did to especially carry us through the pandemic, because I know it wasn't easy, but they truly were very hardworking individuals to get us to this point so that we can actually start a plan and have it formalized so that we know how to best utilize the technology. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Up next, I'm sorry when I said 4, it was really 5. We have the calendar and the wellness presentation. So,
Five,
yes,
not
so
4.
Nicole has both of those though. And I will start with the calendar conversation.
Who has the clicker?
Oh,
there we go. Okay, so this calendar is very similar to one you've seen in the past. This was one of the options presented in the past to the board. However, and this option was the option that looks like our calendar has typically looked historically, observing the school being closed where we have been closed for other holidays historically. But the change we've made here is that we've included an additional in-service day and we have gone down 1 student day. So a question came up, like we always have 184 student days, 192 teacher days. We need 180 student days at the end of the year. We billed 184 because of snow, but could we be flexible with that? And in this calendar, we did add, you'll see in February 18th, we added a full day in-service day for teachers, which drops that down. There is a typo there. There would be 18 student days that month. And the reason we did that was because of the increase in PD that were required. The state every year, it seems like to me at least, they add an additional training that's required. 3 hours of this training, 1 hour of that training. I have a full list here of, Act 13 was the teacher evaluations, 5 hours initially, and then 1 hour every year after that. Trauma-informed care training, the Act 126 child abuse training, which is a 3-hour training. All of these trainings add up, and that's not including our trainings linked to our strategic goals and things that come out of, for instance, the special ed cyclical monitoring that we went through. There was trainings that came out of that we had to implement. And it's really difficult to schedule those things around the PD days that we do have. So we thought going down to 183 student days to add for that additional PD day would be really optimal for our district, our staff. And this is that calendar with just that one change.
Well, Nicole, if I could also add in there, with the addition of all of those hours to meet the required trainings, where the place in our district that has been impacted the most in terms of the loss of time for PD has been the buildings. Because there's everything that Nicole has talked about there. They are district-wide sessions that, that we need to create. So the professional development that a principal and group of teachers in their building may have been able to work to plan on before, it's just been whittled away over the last few years. So our intent would be to give back some of that time that could be planned at the building level.
Was this the calendar A? I'm going back to my notes when we did this, like calendar.
I think I want to say it was calendar 1. Yes.
I called it A. All right, but A.
But it was the calendar that did not include, we had looked at 2 additional holidays and we looked at the data behind those holidays. This does not include those holidays. So
that's what I thought, but I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
You got it.
And is it correct, I'm not seeing the half days shown up on here yet.
They're not here yet because we were just focused on
when school
student
open
day,
and clo-
when
yep.
school opens, student days, teacher days,
So
and
just
they'll be
wanted to
added.
Point that out that they will be
Oh, they
layered
will be
on,
added,
that will
yes.
still have it right, because I'm sure like people will look at it, was like, oh, what would, like, Halloween usually isn't that a half day, that kind of stuff. So rest assured, those will be.
Those will all be on there. It was just really important to focus on the days.
Yep.
Because those half days count as days.
Yes, thank you. And then, so it is starting after Labor Day. There, I see a week of spring break in April with the Monday following as an in-service day. So for students, that would be the Easter Monday observation that sometimes doesn't fall onto our calendar. And I counted the winter break at being 12 days long with the way that the holidays fall. So it was like 10 days the last couple of years or whatever. I was like, oh, that is a solid winter break there.
That's counting weekends.
With the weekends, yes, starting right, because the 20th would be the Friday, and then the 21st to June, or January 2nd. I was like, that is that calendar like works to the winter break there.
Yes.
That was a long winter break.
So-
Good one.
And this is 24, 25.
24,
Yeah,
25.
Yeah, a couple of years till we get there. One thing I would say, if this is a draft that's gonna be circulated, there is a box around, June 10th, which the key says is graduation day. I'm not sure we would know that.
No, we don't
For this
know that
So
yet.
that should maybe be removed so people aren't starting to book hotel rooms or whatever.
One quick question. I can't remember if it was this past Christmas or winter break or the year previous, that we were able to look at closing the buildings to be able to give the staff an extra day. Was that this past year?
That was not this school year, it was the previous
It was the
school year.
previous, okay. And I just wasn't sure if that was something that we had considered to do with this calendar as well, as something just like looking at the structure of that week, if that is something that's a possibility.
That is something that we could look at down the road. That does not impact the number of teacher days, nor does it impact student days.
Yeah.
So we were looking to make sure that we can get a calendar that is suitable for families in the community, and our teaching staff. But we certainly can,
Yeah, I would just think the way that the week falls, that 23rd might be something nice to be able to give staff that building day.
Yep, we can look at that. Thanks.
I can go on to my next presentation then, if you're all still with me.
Any other questions?
Any other questions? Okay, do you have the clicker?
So when
Thank
we
you.
send this to the board, we'll now add in the days for conferences and all that type.
Okay, so I'm also presenting tonight on our annual update on our school wellness committee, and this May is Mental Health Awareness Month, so I'm also going to include mental health in this presentation. Our wellness committee many times ends up speaking a lot about mental health and wellness during our committee meetings, so I thought it was important to include that as well. So the school wellness policy has been around for many years at this point, probably over 10. It was last updated in 2020. This policy is a requirement of USDA and PDE. The Wellness Committee includes many stakeholders such as administrators, faculty, students, parents, community members, and Dr. McKay is our school board representative. We meet via Zoom throughout the school year. The policy supports physical activity and wellness and the implementation of the USDA nutrition guidelines, which oversees like what's served in our cafeteria, what can be served at classroom celebrations. And there's communication around this policy that this is an annual update that has to happen every single year, but it also, things that are happening throughout the district go into Haverford happenings. The principals communicate with their families regarding activities that are happening. The policy was last updated in November 2020. The policy requires an update every 3 years, so the policy is up to be updated again in November of 2023, which is coming very soon. So before the end of the year, the Wellness Committee will receive the policy to review and provide feedback so that I can then take the feedback, put it all together and send it off to the school board policy committee for their review. So that'll be happening in the next few weeks. That's the start of that. Next slide. Like I mentioned, we meet throughout the year. We meet via Zoom. And some of the topics we cover are wellness activities across all levels. There's a representative from every level present in the meetings. We've had students attend more this year than we've had in past years. We talk about the cooking demonstrations that are happening across the district, menu items that are added. The safe food list was a focus this year because it's been updated. Our food services is working on a few little tweaks to correct some things, so that'll be going out. And also mental health supports, like I mentioned earlier. This is a list of the elementary school activities. I'm not gonna read all of these. They at times remain the same from year to year, so I'm just gonna highlight what's new this year. And at our elementary level, we've been very lucky to add new activities and clubs. I heard about the dance club that's very popular, Ms. Mastrocola has been telling me. The Eco Action Club, the Chess Club, there's CARES clubs in the different elementary buildings. We've also been able this year to implement the SEW screener at 3rd grade. Last year we did it in 6th and 9th grade, and we were able to do that again in 3rd grade this year. We have also focused a lot on our responsive classrooms. Erin Smith-Dells is our lead teacher for ELA. She spoke earlier on a little video box in another presentation. She's phenomenal. This year she introduced morning meeting and positive adult language during induction for all new teachers. She also covered morning meeting, positive adult language, and establishing routines for all elementary teachers throughout the year. She layered in training around logical consequences and positive discipline for our elementary teachers. The staff have these lanyards to utilize, and I printed out so I can give you some examples, but of language to use for reinforcing and reminding language, and I think I'm taking this home with me to work with my 5-year-old and 9-year-old, but some examples are reminding or reinforcing language. I noticed, I can see, you remembered to, did you notice, reminding language, who can remember, show me, let's remember, think back to yesterday. So those are just some examples that our staff have on a lanyard for easy access, so they're using appropriate language with our students. And Erin has also trained our lunch monitors on responsive classroom, and she's presented at faculty meetings throughout the year. So there's been a focus. We have had the responsive classroom, and she's done a lot of PD throughout the year on responsive classroom at the elementary level.
And can I just give a shout out to April Wolf, who also, because of her history at the elementary, has supported those trainings as well, and is always looking for ways how this might translate through to secondary.
I'm going to do the same for the middle school because some of these activities remain the same, but things that were added this year, we talked a lot about the Lakeside neurologic support and other presentations that was added to 6th grade, not to 6th grade, to the middle school this year. But for as far as restorative practices, which is an addition as well this year at the middle school, we have joined the DCIU STOP. There's been a STOP grant through the DCIU, and so that's a 3-year process to provide services and support to schools across the county. Our middle school has identified a leadership team, which includes Randy Taylor, who presented earlier this evening, Shakura Monroe, who's our supervisor of secondary special programs, who I work with, Colleen Malzinski, who's a guidance counselor, and Danielle Beeman and Jay Witzel, who are 2 teachers. They'll all be participating in a 2-day training this summer. And again, this is going to be a process going through 3 years. But what does it look like for our students now? And right now, our students are experiencing restorative conferences when it's appropriate in different disciplinary situations, and the use of restorative questioning for unexpected behaviors. Our high school continues to, I don't even know how they continue to add clubs because it's something new every year. There's so many clubs. There was a school-wide talent show, a club that put that together this year. Medical Professionals of Tomorrow is a new club, and Teachers Teammates, which I understand is a club that fundraises for teachers who may need support in getting supplies for the classroom in other districts. So that sounded like a really cool club. We have our athletics. We continue with our wellness days, which I was fortunate enough to hear students present on wellness days, and teachers offer just a variety. It's a lot of student voices. Students come up with ideas and they get to select what they participate in, and it just seems like a really great thing for our students. They're participating in things they want to, and they're getting to introduce to other students that they may have not met in their classes. So that has been something we've heard a lot about in our wellness committee meetings from our students. As far as food services go, we continue with Discovery Kitchen. You'll see a picture coming up of Chef Josh presenting in a classroom on smart snacks, making popcorn. Mood Boost, which is a presentation on how different food affects our mood. Student Choice, so you'll see pictures shortly of students doing some taste testing at the middle school and high school. They do food demos during the wellness day, and again, the updates, something got cut off, but there's an update of Safe Food List coming out. What is cut off is that when the Safe Food List comes out, you'll notice that parents can order party packs from our food services, so they don't have to worry about reviewing the USDA guidelines for smart snacks when they're contributing to a classroom celebration, they can simply order something from Student Services that meets that criteria. So we thought, I mean, I as a mom was very excited. I would love that option if it was in my school district. You make it easier for parents. There's a lot to that smart snack list with allergens and saturated fat and calorie, and doing a party pack that could be purchased seemed to make sense. So our food services, so they would put that together for our parents. The next slide are the pictures I mentioned. So you can see the high school, middle school up at the top there, doing some taste tests. And at the bottom you have Linwood with Mood Boost, and on the right is Coopertown enjoying some popcorn with Chef Josh. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the mental health supports. I did mention this is a topic that comes up a lot about at our wellness meetings. The wellness policy itself is really focused on USDA food guidelines, physical activity, nutrition. Through our strategic planning, and I think through all of our experience the last few years, we know social emotional wellness is a huge part of our wellness. So in our schools, we have home and school visitors, school counselors, school psychologists. The Lakeside support I mentioned earlier, that's actually being expanded to the high school next year. Lakeside counselors, board certified behavior analysts, and behavior specialist consults, who all provide support to our students and staff in our district. This is a continuation, but the programs that are in place. So we have our SEL lessons that our students participating, our Students Assistance Program, which is right now at the middle school and high school, but next year it'll expand to the elementary level. We were able to get funding through a security and mental health grant that will fund training for our staff at the elementary level in SAP. We have child study team, as mentioned earlier, at every level. The social wellness, emotional wellness screener, that's at 3rd, 6th, and 9th grade. We offer parent trainings. The IU actually offers a lot of parent trainings as well, and we promote those through our website. An increased offering in clubs and activities, the newsletter that's been going out for SEW, the counselor's newsletter that also goes out. We continue to have our virtual calming rooms on our website for use of anyone who wants to use them. And a mental health resource guide, which is also on our website. In addition, there are a lot of other resources on the community portion of our website with regards to mental health. So I encourage everyone to check out the resources on our website because it's extensive and we're continually adding. The next slide, these are some of the pictures of wellness activities happening across the district. In the top left-hand corner, there's a high school students playing, it looks like Candyland, but it's definitely a board game of some sort. It's a game of life. It's a game of life, okay, I'm sorry. I have a 5-year-old and a 9-year-old, did I mention that?
They probably did that.
They could play Candyland if they want. In the upper right-hand corner are the peer conflict mediators at Chestnut Wald. Bottom left is Chestnut Wald as well, breeding to a therapy dog. And the bottom right, Coopertown's Kindness Week. So it's a picture of students celebrating Kindness Week. Are there any questions? I tried my best.
No questions, but thank you for that. And thank you. The food service stuff, I have to just say, and I know it's very late, but there's nothing that gets my two sons that are in the district excited more than like when there's the food, like when they do a demonstration or tasting. I heard about some hot chicken sandwich that Reese thought was phenomenal. The popcorn that they did at Linwood. He heard there's tasters. He's like, can I get involved with it? I don't like the pancake on a stick. I'm like, I have no pull with that. I have no, like, I'm not involved there. But that, it seems from, 2 different age levels, they love that. Like, just love it. So I think that's very cool. Thank you.
I'll just say for me, one of the best parts of the meetings that we've had is hearing from the students and their enthusiasm for the things that they're reporting back has just been really wonderful. And hearing that they are gathering information from other students as well of like what's working, what's not working, and that's been really nice.
I think I'm excited about the updated safe food list as a homeroom parent, and just being able to find snacks that every child can have and it's safe for them, and they're still feeling included and can enjoy the fun. So a party pack sounds amazing.
I think that might have been Miss Mr. Cola's idea.
I like it.
Yep. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. That concludes our presentations for the evening, believe it or not.
Thank you for, going through a lot of material and all the staff support that brought those presentations. We do now have time for public comment if there is anyone who would like to speak.
I just had a couple of quick
Just say
questions.
your name.
Oh, yeah, sure. I'm Sarah Johnson. I'm a resident of the district. I just wrote down a couple of questions. Really, my main question is about the PSSM survey and the data. There's so much of, I guess, the presentations are based on that PSSM data, and we heard there's a PSSM data team, and I know at one of the meetings, Ms. Weideman, you said that UPenn would slice and dice the data and then give us a presentation. And I'm wondering when that actual UPenn data presentation is going to happen, and will the public be able to see it?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I did not say anything on behalf of Penn, so I don't
Well, no,
know.
but after the presentation, like we saw Ms. Carter presented the presentation, and we saw that, with the different religions and all that. But then I thought that, what's the actual data at the end of it?
So the data that we presented, that's the actual information. When we say the data team, that's really to help our administrators actually go through and understand the data for each of their buildings. So it's actually pulling it so that it's disaggregated by building so that they can then think through what are some action areas to help increase that sense of belonging in their building. So everything that we have, the information, we actually already shared it for you.
So that was it? Just like all, that was
Yes.
it? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I just didn't think there was a lot there personally. And, I do have a lot of, and I know Ms. Carter didn't sign on for that UPenn PSSM, like she wasn't here when that contract was signed. And she's been, very, very generous with her time and answering my questions. And I do really appreciate your time, Ms. Carter, because we've spoken on the phone and I know she's really done her best to answer all my questions. I really do appreciate that. I've talked to UPenn, I've talked to the people in the privacy department, I've tried to get in touch with somebody from the Catalyst department. I even contacted Dr. McKay because I know she works for UPenn and I thought maybe she could help me navigate. I just can't get any questions answered about this UPenn PSSM, especially about those demographic questions. I have a lot of concerns. So I think we assign these contracts with UPenn, we're paying them for trainings, they're collecting this data. And I don't think it's a great survey. And I think that so much is based on this one survey that I personally, as somebody that, has written curriculum and has worked in data analytics, it's not a very well done survey. And the fact that nobody from UPenn can answer any questions, and we can't directly ask UPenn any questions about this survey. I think it's just really concerning to me. So I just, again, can you just confirm again, Dr. Rushi, that that survey is going to be changed from opt-out to opt-in? Because you had given us that commitment, but I haven't seen anything about it in the policy meeting. You had told me that the PSSM survey, currently you have to opt out of it. And you had said that going forward, you would change it to opt-in.
Going forward, now, are you talking about the policy meeting, Sarah, where we looked at the policy 912, I think it is?
Well, I guess, no, I'm specifically just talking about this, not necessarily policy 912, but just this PSSM survey. Currently, you have to opt out. If you don't want your child to take it, you have to opt them out of the survey, currently. That's the current policy, and you had told me that you were going to change the policy to be opt-in.
We're changing the policy for opting in for outside research. Now we'll have to look and see which ones does that apply to.
Okay, that's not what you had confirmed to me specifically about the PSSM survey, though. You said you were going to change it to be opt-in and not opt-out.
All right, Sarah, I'm sorry, I will have to take.
Because remember that was the concern, that the opt-out policy wasn't working?
I know that was the concern of the opt-out policy, and I recall a lot of discussions at the meeting about that. We went back and changed the policy and the administrative regulation that it would be for outside research that you would have to opt in.
So that means that doesn't include PSSM?
Well, the PSSM data are not being used outside of here. So there's more, there's also the other piece that we were talking about getting something in writing from Penn that the data are not used anywhere else.
Which we cannot get that in writing. I mean, Ms. Carter tried to get that. Her and I both got verbal confirmation. They will not give us anything in writing confirming that.
And I think I had shared with you, we are initiating something for them to sign that it will not be. So we're not asking them to write it. We're going to initiate the document.
Yeah, so going forward, hopefully that, I mean, going forward, I hope we don't sign on with these UPenn surveys again, but after what we've seen. But so you're saying, like, next year, what's going to happen with the PSM survey? Is it going to be the same procedure where parents have to contact the school principal to opt out?
Yes.
So, yes, you would still have to contact them, but the way that the survey would be collected, like, I'm gonna be a little bit more hands-on with that, so we'll at least have all of that information, and then we can also share it back with the principals, so the principals will be able to see it on the form that the parents fill out, but I'll also take that list and reshare it back with the principals, so that it's a reminder as it comes up of which students have opted out.
All right, that's not the confirmation I got from you, Dr. Rushi, initially. So I feel like you're kind of going back on your word with this.
Okay, Sarah, I don't feel I'm going back on my word. It just, I don't recall, and we can talk a little bit more about that. You can sense my hesitation. I'm not coming right out and saying to you, I absolutely did not say that. So I want to see what our conversation may have been that I created that impression for you.
Because, I mean, really, that, as long as we could get the opt-in and not the opt-out, that was really my main concern. I really think parents need to be aware of this survey, especially because of those demographic questions, and especially because we don't really know what UPenn does with this data later. I mean, they're giving us just a verbal confirmation that they're not selling the data, but they will not give us anything saying that in writing. So again, that's why I just think that parents need to know. So I don't know why this can't be an opt-in. And we had talked about, that was the whole thing we talked about, like through Power School, like it would be easy. Instead of doing opt-out, we could do opt-in through Power School. Like that was that whole conversation that we had. So, okay, I mean, I guess I'll go back and look at my notes. I know you did make a confirmation to me on that.
Okay.
But we can both go back and check. All right, thank you for your time.
Was there anyone else who wanted to speak?
Good evening, I'm Helene Comrie Smith. I live here in the school district. I just want to rattle off some facts because I think some facts are necessarily missing in the statistics that were presented here tonight. 81% of Haverford School District students are white. 6% of students are Asian, 5% of the students are Black, 5% of the students are 2 or more races, and 3% are Hispanic. 27 times more white students than there are Hispanic. There's 13.5 times more white students than Asian. There's 16.2 times more white students than there are Black. So in reality, like, let's compare us to the Philadelphia School District, which is predominantly a Black school district that spends $3.9 billion on their students, that have rundown schools. Students don't have textbooks, okay? And we're sitting here having these discussions about disproportionality. I want to say that there was a baseline data here on gifted students. It wasn't clear if those gifted students, was it encompassing this entire school district? Was it encompassing those only in the elementary school? Was it encompassing those in the middle school? Was it encompassing those in the high school? So your data shows that 1.27% of Asians are represented in our gifted program. So let's put that into balance. So then that's 21% of our population. Really, of the Asians are accessing that gifted program. Let's look at our Black population. 0.25% are in the gifted program. So it comes down to 5% of the Black population in our school district. Hispanic, 1.04. So then let's look at that. That comes out to 34% of the Hispanic students that are accessing the gifted program. And then when we look at multiracial, it's 1.11, And then we look at that, it comes out to 25% of those students. So what are we saying here at Haverford? What kind of practices are you implementing? What are you doing? Are you saying that we are not providing services for kids of minorities? I mean, I'm looking at the data here. I mean, what are we chopping up here? What are we looking at? What are we saying? Are we saying we're not servicing those kids? I'd like to know that. I'd also like to say, I noticed some of the things on here when we talk about mental health. Mental health, for my kids that are graduates of 2021 and 2019, the things that you've done here, my kids were part of that. And I want to talk about the fishbowl activity. Most of you don't know. I live in the community. I work in the community. I tutor kids. I help kids. That fishbowl activity kids engaged in, they went and told each other. They told each other the privacy and the intimacy of those moments that was discussed in the fishbowl. And you know, Mr. Donaghy, you got a phone call that day from me. And so I just want to say, kids go and say things. There is so much bigotry in this community and hate. It's unbelievable. And I want you to know, this board, you're helping perpetuate that. And the kids are going home and saying things to each other, and they're carrying tales. And you should know that by some of the practices and the engagement that you're doing. Thank you.
Can I provide a little bit of clarity for the percentage? So what you were looking at for disproportionality, those were not actually percentages. Those were risk ratios, which is a likelihood or a risk of a student being identified for gifted education or a higher level course. So that's really saying that, let's say, an Asian student is 1.27 times more likely to be referred for a gifted or a higher level course. And when you think about risk ratios or likelihoods, you're actually looking to see if you can get it at 1 so that it's proportionate for the representation of the population. So those are risk ratios and likelihoods for all of our students across the district within the gifted program. So those are not percentages, but those are the likelihoods or the risk of them. So it would be like a Black student is 1/4 likely to be referred for gifted or a higher level course, but this is gifted data. Hispanic students are 1.04 times likely to be referred, which means we have students in there, but when we look at them in according to what their representation is within our population, that's when we look at what their likelihood would be. So we use likelihood for gifted and higher level, and often we use risk for when we think about special education and we think about it for discipline. So that's what that's referencing. So I just want to clarify, it's not a percentage.
I'm sorry, I'm part of my ignorance, what's the fishbowl? I have no, I don't know what that is.
Mr. Donaghy might be able to give a better description than I can.
A fishbowl
Just
is when...
conceptually, Pete, not the specific details.
Yeah, fishbowl is when students get together and they discuss a topic. So the students, it's student-run by our No Place for Hate committee. And a fishbowl is where people sit in a circle and discuss a topic. And then the students, it's student-run, so they can discuss whatever they want in whatever form they want. It's not censored in any way by adults. So we have a fishbowl next week to discuss positive ways to handle expectations after high school. So we don't know what they're gonna discuss. They're gonna sit in a circle. They're gonna discuss.
After-school club environment, is that?
Yeah, we do it during the school day.
Oh, during the school, okay.
Yep. So that's the topic for next week that they chose. So it's student voice, so the positives of student voice. Also with student voice, we try not to censor what they want to discuss. So they come and they discuss it. So that's the topic for next week. We've varied topics throughout the years.
Thanks, Pete.
Thank you.
Another speaker?
There was a fishbowl in Westchester that had students on it too.
Hi, Janice Miller, resident of Haverford Township. First of all, I would say thank you so much for allowing me to speak tonight. I am so glad I showed up tonight. When I was online earlier reading the, Christina, what you presented tonight, I don't even know how to put how beyond like angry, upset, frustrated I was. I'm so glad I was here. I got to listen to you speak, and I think his name was Randy. I paid attention to everything you guys said. It clarified a lot of stuff for me. The only concern I have is the way that it was written out on paper. That is what got me upset. I was certified in special ed in Pennsylvania, Haverford High School graduate, class of 98. And we were always told, and I've heard here as well tonight, the positive reinforcement, positive direction. The first thing on that form was disproportionately white students and how to, forgive me, this might not be the exact quote, how to remove or how to lower the disproportionately white students. And in my opinion, being special ed certified, instead of saying that, which was presented on the second slideshow, it said how to increase students of non-white, which was much better. I guess so. In that case, what I have to say here from what I read online versus showing up in person is try to be more careful, because as you can see tonight, there's, I don't know, I mean, this community is what, 50, 80,000 strong, and there's like less than 20 of us here. So a lot of people who weren't able to come tonight and read that, I mean, I was in an uproar. I took, not offense to that, but I took almost like, you guys are educators, you should know much better than to say, I don't know how to put this without offending anyone, but I literally read it as, you know, not get rid of white students, but I read it as a very negative connotation towards white students, as opposed to a positive connotation towards students who aren't white. And that's the direction I think you guys should lead on your slideshows and your things for the people who aren't able to show up. And thank you for your time.
Advance and beyond coupon's very valuable now, Dr. Rich.
Okay.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? With that, we have had a lot of good and robust discussion. It's 9:30 and our meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Thank you.
These are show